Up demand.
being shown on the,
Hold on one
okay,
second.
now it's, okay,
Okey dokey.
it just came up now, yeah,
While
okay.
we're working on getting that done, I would like to make one quick announcement. We have, I think all of you have been receiving the emails about the condominium structural issues task force, which has been taking up a lot of important issues. We had one meeting, which was a week ago, last Monday. Our next meeting is this Monday. The meetings are sunshined, so any county commissioner that wishes to attend is welcome to attend. The meeting will be in the chambers, although I think that your seat is probably already given away because we have 17 members. But if any commissioner lets me know in advance, I'll make that you're planning on being here, I'll make sure we save your seat for you. If any of you that have condominiums in your district want to let the condominium associations in your district know about both the existence of this, it has received a great deal of press, but also we are only taking public comment at one meeting, and that one meeting is this one starting on Monday, starting at 2 o'clock. And let me remind everyone what I've said about that. We have no jurisdiction, staff, or anything else to deal with specific issues. Somebody comes and says, well, I live at the Acme condominium phase 2, building 12, and let me tell you about those SOB board members, I will cut them off. If they want to talk about as an example, I mean, certainly, but we are not investigating individual condominiums, but I just wanted to let all of you know, because I know most of us have condominiums in our district somewhere, that the opportunity for public comment on the issues is this Monday. And I will also pass out at that meeting, if anybody wants a copy of the minute of the extended notes of the meeting taken by Maite from County Attorney's Office, if you'll contact my office, we'll get you a copy of those, or if you contact the County Attorney's Office, I guess I prefer you go through the County Attorney. The County Attorney will get you a copy of that. So I just wanted to make that announcement so that all of you know about it and have the ability to let your condominiums know about it. Again, next Monday, starting at 9:30, it is on Vimeo. People will be able to call in only for comment unless a member of the 17-member task force invites somebody specifically to speak. Are there any questions on that? If not, Commissioner Holness, you had a question or comment on something?
If you would give me a moment to
Commissioner Holness, you recognize, sir.
say a few words. It's been a tough season for me, losing my mother on July 6th, the day after her funeral, losing my father, July 25th. My mother always said, God is able, and he'll see me through, and I believe that. Let me thank, and then of course the situation with my daughter. She's my child. Hurts. Had nothing to do with that. Some of you know the fact that we've been distanced for a little bit. She's my child. Will always be my child. Let me thank all of you who send me your cards, your thoughtfulness, your calls, your encouragement, your support that I'm getting even now through all of this. Commissioner Fisher, you visited the viewing of my mother. I appreciate you showing. And again, thanks to all of you and everyone out there. who knows the difficulties of life. We don't control it. But again, I believe God is able to see me through this season. And again, thanks to all of you who have called and sent cards. There's so many. The outpouring is great. Thank you.
Commissioner Honus, the politics aside, I know that you have the sympathy of every member of the county commission as you go through those life struggles, losing a parent, I remember losing both of mine quite distinctly. Actually, when I lost my first parent, I don't remember quite distinctly. It was Ola Hayes. So please accept the sincere condolences of each and every member of the county commission, and I hope that you do find the strength to be proceeding through all of your family issues. Is there any other issue that needs to be made before we take up the budget? If not, and just the Senator Rich, you are still on the line, correct? Are we now
Yes,
on?
I am.
Are we on video now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and we are on video, so we will take up the agenda.
The only thing,
One quick thing. I just
Okay.
want to say that I love all my children, all of them. And you guys know how close many of them have been in and out of this office. And it's, again, painful, but we must go forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. Senator Rich, I'm sorry, you were saying something, ma'am?
yeah, I just wanted to say that the video and the phone are totally out of sync. So I don't know if there's anything they can do about it. I've tried all of these ones, and they're just, not in sync. So
I've complained about that for years, ma'am, and I'm sure that someday we'll develop some technology that will permit sound and video to go out at the same time. Don't know when that new technology will be invented, but I'm sure it will be. At this point in time, I need to make one additional announcement. And Dr. Sharif, I've been informed by the county attorney's office that it is urgent, required, that every member wear their face mask during the meeting. At county, I don't know if you wish to discuss this or if you just want me to say it, but.
Yes, it's my understanding, Senator Geller, that there's an amended procedure that's coming out that is going to address this before our first actual meeting on the 24th. But for today, the rule is still in effect. The masks are required, except when you're eating or drinking, essentially.
Right. And there are equal protection arguments. If we are requiring everyone else to wear a mask, we need to be wearing them. Now, I have asked, and there is an amendment to this that will be ready by Tuesday, which will say that, and I thought it was already in place, and Bertha, if you can sign it as soon as possible, that the one exception to that is while you're actually speaking and you're inside the plexiglass, if you are both actually speaking and inside the plexiglass, you may remove your mask while you are actually speaking, but you must remove it only when you're about to speak, and you must put it back on immediately after you're speaking. County Attorney?
Yes, Senator, the exception that I think administration is going to issue is going to be a little bit broader than that.
Okay.
But it's going to be, as I understand it, while you're seated in between the plexiglass, you're not obligated to wear a mask because the plexiglass does offer protection. There is distancing, there's not a lot of density. So essentially, as I understand it, Bertha, that's going to be the.
So I saw a draft this morning of what was prepared. Monica and I will spend, after this meeting, we'll make sure that it's in final form, and we'll get it out to you. But we were just debating. We just have a couple of situations that we want to make sure, primarily with some of the security issues that we have downstairs, that we want to make sure we get that right.
Right, but again, based on equal protection and, if we want people in the audience to do this, I've been told that under our current order, we need to be wearing masks, although again, I've asked that this
Okay.
be amended by
So
the next
then,
meeting.
I'm going to ask one thing, keep it short, because I have asthma and I can't sit up here all day and have this mask on. So that's why I get up, I leave, take my mask off, and I come back. And sometimes during the meeting, I just have to take it off because you guys have very, very long discussions about every item. So if it gets to the point where it gets long, I'm just going to leave and go take my break, take a mask break, and then come back.
Yes, ma'am, I understand that. And again, if you have any questions, please talk to county attorney.
Based on the CDC guidelines, because there's plexiglass between us, and we're 6 feet apart, we're not in each other's face, and there's nobody in front of us. We shouldn't really have to have it on the dais. But if that's what you guys want to do, then let's try to keep discussion short. Let's try to not prolong the meetings and allow for people to breathe, okay?
Okay, and thank you. And Commissioner Sharif, I believe that this is being relaxed, just not at today's meeting, because when I saw the order, I asked that it be relaxed for some of the reasons that you're saying about the plexiglass, but it has not yet been relaxed, is the point. All right, according to our agenda, the agenda I have, the first item up, well, it says agenda water and wastewater.
Yes, so,
Is that correct?
Mayor, if I might.
Yes.
So today we have 3 presentations. Why 3? Because they are weighty issues. So we'll kick it off with water. Wastewater is probably the least of the 3, but followed by Port Everglades. There's a lot going on at Port Everglades, and we'll end with the airport. Obviously, there's a lot going on there too. So we wanted to make sure that you have an opportunity to see how we're building this budget based on what is happening today, what we see occurring, and what some of the potential threats to the budget that we're looking at. So with that, Alan Garcia, water, wastewater. So we'll have the staff pull that up.
You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. It's my absolute pleasure for the 14th straight year to be able to present the water and wastewater fiscal year operating budget and fiscal year 22-26 capital program. Let's see, are they pulling it up? Okay, oh. There we go. Thank you, Jennifer. All righty. So the first element of the program or the budget is our capital program. And as with the past years, we have the same 3 program elements. It's system reliability, quality, sustainability, septic tank elimination, and then addressing regulatory rule impacts, both on the water supply and also with the ocean outfall and reuse. So system reliability, quality, sustainability. We've tried to be over the years proactive with our infrastructure system improvements for both the water and wastewater treatment, water distribution, wastewater collection, and transmission to support reliable service goals for our customer. And I think we continue to achieve that. Some of the intermediate goals or the smaller goals are reducing sewer backups, reducing water and sewer main breaks from aging failures. We've got a new fine structure in place by FDEP for sewer main breaks. And I think this happened after a lot of the spills on one of the hurricanes, I think up in Jacksonville. They came out and now have a lot more aggressive fine structure if you do have a sewer main break. So that's become more critical. I think they do still allow you to do some of the fine as an in-kind project, but still, we want to try to avoid that and avoid the high-profile sewer main breaks. Reducing system-wide boil water events as a result of the 4-log virus removal system, which is now in place at 1A, 2A, and 3A. The positive benefit of having the system in place at 3A is we purchase our water from the City of Hollywood, and then it comes to our facility, we repump it, sometimes add more chemicals and send it out to our 3A and 3BC districts. 3A is where the Fort Lauderdale International Airport is. And so if Hollywood was to have a system-wide boil water, it would affect our customers in the 3A area, except for the fact that now with this 4-log virus, we can ensure that any pathogens in that water become inactivated, and so it helps as a result to eliminate any kind of system-wide boil water order for our 3A plant. That doesn't mean that if we have a break, we don't have little isolated boil water notices, but the system-wide ones are dramatically reduced, especially in this case where it could be something Hollywood did, and then it still affects us. So we're working on the last district, 3BC now, and eventually all of our districts will have this treatment technology. Finally, we want to ensure the long-term sustainability of water treatment, water distribution, wastewater collection, and biosolid disposal, and the long-term sustainability for our water supply. So water service reliability, last 12 months, we had 82 boil water events due to broken water mains or scheduled maintenance. 31 were due to pipe failures, 23 were caused by contractors damaging pipes, and 28 scheduled maintenance tie-ins. Once again, when we see some of those breaks caused by the contractors on our jobs, it's only because they are in the process of replacing aging pipes. And when they're working that close to pipes, sometimes they can get breaks on the older pipe before the new system goes in. So it's not always a bad thing. It sort of shows that progress is going on, and but it's sort of inevitable with some of these pipes and how close they have to work to some of these pipes. Really, the important thing here is when we have these breaks, because of having a very good network system of isolation valves, we can isolate these breaks to where the number of customers it affects is minimized. And you can see we've got a medium impact of 5 service connections per event. Now, some events are more, some events only affect 1 customer, especially if it's a maintenance type issue. But we definitely have a system that allows us to isolate and minimize how many of our customers are affected by these events. Typically, our repairs are made within 4 hours, and typically the boil water notification is cleared after 48 hours. We did have 1 system-wide event in our District 2A system, and that was due to a lightning strike that affected some of the pumping rates. It actually closed a valve in an automatic valve in a closed position, and that dropped pressure in the system. So we had to put the entire 2A system on a boil water notice. Okay, so talk about sewered areas. Remember, one of our goals are the septic tank elimination. This map you see here, pretty busy map. It's the entire county. It's all the utilities within Broward County. This map is maintained by EPGM on information in their database on which areas do not have active sewer, and then areas that have been sewered as of 2000, and areas, sewered since 2000. The easier map to read is this next one. So this is one, if you look at this map here, the orange areas represent our service districts. And within some of those orange areas, you will see a little bit of yellow. Those are areas that are not sewered. So those are on our plan to do that, to eliminate those septic tanks. And then you also see down on the left side some yellow that is listed as undesignated. And that basically means no utility has claimed that area. And a lot of that area includes Southwest Ranches. But there's been no utility that says, hey, we want to have the right to serve that area. It's going to be our area. Nobody's claimed it. So that's always a potential for growth of a county system, are those areas too.
You may want to explain why that is. Again, sometimes it may be apparent to, it's apparent to us, but maybe not apparent to others. Putting in a sewer system is extremely expensive. Water systems, you'll see a lot of people fighting to get those because they're not. But putting in those sewer systems is very costly. So you would want to make sure you have a lot of customers before you take that on. Now, Alan said that might be an area for the county, but there are contiguous systems around that area that are not county that they could if they wanted to. But if ultimately our goal is to make sure that our county is, that we have eliminated septic tanks in our county, which is a big goal for this commission, and we know water quality is affected immensely by that, we may have to start having conversations about areas like that, or work with those municipal systems that are contiguous to that area.
And as Bertha said, these areas are very rural, and so there's always been a reluctance to, bring a sewer in because of the cost. In the next slide, I'll get a little bit into our program, and we've done the easy areas, the areas that we can get done for a reasonable amount of money, and now we're starting to hit some of those areas where you're picking up 6 customers, but it's costing you, $3 million, $4 million, and it's almost $500,000 per customer to bring them on the system. And so at some point, you have to say, hey, what do we need to do? Are there, grant funds or anything else that we could look at some of these areas, because that's a lot of money per property to eliminate the septic tanks. But right now we've got 2,518 septic tanks remaining. We didn't have a lot of construction this past year. Some of that was the pandemic, but some of it's just a cycle of getting these things designed and then the construction, then the design, then the construction. So it's sort of a cyclical effort. Likewise, about 5% of the septic tanks are countywide for all the utilities. We have eliminated 16,183 septic tanks since 2001, and that's through the combination of the neighborhood improvement projects and now our utility analysis zone projects. We're getting these eliminated. We have design and construction currently underway for an additional 153 eliminations. 67 of those are currently under construction. Finally, the big ticket, and if you go back to this slide here, you can see down in the very bottom, there's a BCWWS in yellow. It's just, it's Pembroke Pines area and a little bit of Hollywood. It's the area surrounding Perry Airport. That's our biggest single area. It's got, I believe, 2,000 septic tanks in it, or 1,840 septic tanks. That one is in an active design right now, and we were actually able to benefit through Bertha and the Budget's office in getting some of the CARES Act and American Rescue Act money, I think $21 million to go towards that project, which was designated as, a project to eliminate the septic tank. So those ones are underway, and that'll be a big chunk. Then the remaining 700 plus, those will not be as quick, but we still are targeting and trying to get those done by 2024. But we'll see. There's still some things that affected, such as, a resident won't give a easement because we've got to go past their house and then pick up 3 more properties, and it's a private road, and if the resident doesn't give an easement, then we're sort of stuck there. So we're probably going to still have these little areas that we're going to have to work extra hard on to get done, but we're still doing the lion's share, and I think we're still the leader in Broward County as far as these efforts to get properties off of septic tanks.
The other thing that we're doing, as you well know, with the myriad of surtax projects that we're involved in, some of the municipalities, obviously, they have a lot of maintenance, repair and maintenance projects, and there are other road projects. We're starting to make sure that when we know that there is a project in a municipality, whether it's the municipal project or the county project, and it's affecting a road, and we have a few areas, these little spec areas, that would be the most cost-effective time to go in and grab those, because if you're going to tear up the road, you might as well dig a little deeper and get the sewer done and handle that. So that's the beauty of being able to coordinate these projects from a comprehensive standpoint.
Thanks,
Okay,
Bertha.
sir, I'm going to have some fairly extensive questions about the sewering, but I'll wait until you've completed your presentation.
Okay. The next is regulatory rule impacts. The first one is the 2006 water availability rule. And that, once again, that was the South Florida Water Management District rule that limited the permitted withdrawal of raw water for water treatment to April 2006 levels. So it really caused everybody to have to go out and find alternative water supply sources to meet their future needs beyond 2006. For the county, we targeted and selected and participated in the C51 reservoir for our alternative water supply needs. So the nice thing about last year and since the time of the last budget presentation is we have sold out the Phase 1 allocation thanks to the addition of Miami-Dade and their 15 million gallon capacity agreement. And once again, for those of you that don't remember the C51, that is the reservoir up in Palm Beach County that when it rains, they're going to redirect some of that runoff flow to this reservoir, and it'll store that flow, and then in the dry periods, we'll be able to discharge that flow into the canals and make its way down to the well fields to recharge the well fields. We have received a consumptive use permits from South Florida Water Management District for 20 years for down in the South Regional Well Field at Brian Piccolo. And we have been issued a 1 million gallon per day consumptive use permit for District 1A, and also 2 million gallons per day for District 2A, which is up in the Pompano Deerfield area, also serving Coconut Creek. So we have effectively met our demands for future water supply, and that's been supplemented by our efforts in conservation. Palm Beach Aggregates broke ground on construction of the reservoir in February 2021, and they have a substantial completion date, which is estimated to be September 2022. Reuse successes. Broward County currently has agreements with Palm Beach County, North Springs Improvement District to sell reclaim on a wholesale basis. We also provide reclaim to the city of Pompano Beach for them to treat it at their Oasis plant, and we also provide treated reuse to the city of Coconut Creek for their needs. We are nearing the completion of the expansion of the reuse treatment plant from 10 million gallons per day to 26 million gallons per day. It was a $54 million project, and its estimated completion is September 2021. And if you look at the bottom of your presentation, that concrete structure with looks like little veins inside, that is one of the expansion modules for our reuse filters. At the same time, we had a project to install the transmission main, which was going to take reuse up to Palm Beach County, because we have the agreement with Palm Beach County to take reuse. And also, the line goes out and serves North Springs Improvement District in the wedge properties, because when they developed those properties over the last few years, they required all the developments to put in reuse line. So as part of the settlement agreement with us, when they tried to break off the system, we did promise them that we would provide reuse to their facility at a point at the start of the wedge, and then they would connect and provide reuse to their customers out there.
You may, Alan, just again for the benefit of some of the board members that may not have been aware, one of the reasons there was this huge push for us to get involved in reuse. I mean, it was our way of saying to the state that we're able to meet many of the rules. Particularly, we were dealing with outfall,
Yeah, it was part of the ocean outfall rule.
and when the numbers that we were looking at the time were staggering. I mean, billions of dollars to do that, and more environmentally friendly, and a way to get that is to get to be in compliance with that rule was to be able to do more reuse. So this was a win-win for everybody, but particularly for our system. Yeah,
we took initial estimated costs of up to $1 billion to be able to distribute out enough reuse to meet the requirements of the ocean outfall legislation to down to about $100 million, $100 million, which looks like to be pretty much the final cost for the transmission main and the new treatment plant expansion. The other issue that is on our radar is biosolid disposal. Once again, biosolids are the nutrient-rich organic materials obtained from wastewater treatment, and they can be beneficially used for fertilizer and soil nutrient enhancement. We did have a white paper done by one of our consultants, and they examined some near-term options for converting Class B biosolids to Class AA biosolids. And the difference between the B and the AA is really it's the amount of, there's no changes in the amount of nutrient, nitrogen or phosphorus in the biosolids. It's an amount of inactivation of pathogens. So for instance, when we do Class B, there are certain areas and there are certain regulations as to where you can spread that as a fertilizer, and that's regulated by DEP. They also regulate Class A biosolids. Class AA biosolids are not regulated. They are looked at as fertilizer. So they're sort of regulated by, I think it's the Department of Agriculture, but there's no real prohibition on where that can be used. Part of the problem, though, is a lot of facilities are producing Class AA, and there's really nowhere to sell it or to use it. But it does give you, there are more sites that will take Class AA than Class B. So we are looking at that. There's options as far as you can chemically stabilize that to do the pathogen removal, heating the process. So we're looking at that. The other thing is we've started, our operations division has reached out to the wastewater treatment plant operators within Broward County, Fort Lauderdale, Miramar, Hollywood, others, to try to get some feedback as to whether or not they'd be interested in either a committee, a consortium, to try to look at, could we do some kind of solution that will solve all of our biosolid disposal issues. The other thing about Class AA is, if we did that, I don't believe there's any prohibition on taking Class AA biosolids to the landfill, which gives us a lot more flexibility on disposal. Like I said, we currently send our Class B biosolids to FDEP-approved land farm sites, as well as some of it goes to waste management. And we were very happy that our new 3-year sludge hauling contract, which was issued in January 2020, resulted in a charge of the county at $38 per ton, which was up $2 per ton, but still below like a statewide average of around $50 to $55 per ton. So we're still seeing good prices for the Class B disposal, but we are keeping things moving and looking at options, so we don't have to be at some point reactive versus proactive. Okay, this slide, and I won't spend a lot of time on this. This is just our current 5-year capital program and just the overall cost for each of the elements. Total program cost $436 million. Our operating budget, we produce this chart every year. This is what we call our system costs, which are a combination of our operating budget, operating costs, our current debt service costs, and our capital program costs. Obviously, typically operating costs, we're seeing small increases each year because chemicals go up, materials go up, and we've seen that during the pandemic. We were able to reduce our debt service a little bit through some financing efforts a couple of years ago. And then the capital program costs, we have some flexibility there as to how much cash finance capital we're going to do. But you can see currently the system costs overall are about $108 million, and it's effectively been flat for the last 3 years. The infamous rate survey. Once again, we produce this chart every year. It shows us where Broward County currently is with our current rates at $69.65 for a customer with 5,000 gallons consumption and a 5/8-inch meter. The very interesting point here is Fort Lauderdale, which used to be at the bottom of the chart, is now above Broward County. And they're above Broward County on their inside city rates. They're one of the cities that charge a 25% surcharge for areas they serve outside the municipal limits of Fort Lauderdale. So that's always a supplement that allows them to sort of keep the rates for their in-city customers down. But in this case, Fort Lauderdale, because of their massive issues with their systems, have had to continue to do significant rate hikes that have now pushed them past us. So we've always been down in pretty much this bottom third of the range, and it's something that we're proud of, that we can offer that, because in the beginning, when I started this 14 years ago, we were near the very top because we just started our capital program. We had a lot of costs associated with that, but we got that done. We got that done. Those dollars are spent, they're gone. They're not impacting customers going forward. A lot of these other cities are still looking at big ticket price tags to upgrade and make their system more reliable. So we'll see how those changes over the year, but we're still very happy that we can continue to have manageable rates for our customers. For this proposed year, we're looking at a little over a 3% increase, which for the average customer is a $2.15 per month increase. And this just gives a breakdown of some of the increases in the amounts for different customer consumption rates, and whether they're residential, commercial. We show resident with 3,000 gallons of consumption, 5, 10, 20, and then 25 with a 1-inch meter. So you can see the total increases there, but they're all around 3%. Even our customers that are probably the most economically disadvantaged, and those are the ones that typically are using 3,000 gallons or less, you can see their rate is $57 a month. Our wholesale rates for wastewater and wholesale raw water both have gone down. Now, for the wastewater, we're going to see probably level revenues, because while the rate's going down a little bit, we are anticipating an increased flow. But once again, both of these rates by contract are trued up annually. So whatever the final costs are is what everybody pays. And if the rates were more than what the cost was, they get a rebate. If they weren't enough, then they get a bill. Okay, finally, COVID impacts. So in March 2020, in conjunction with working with the county admin's office, we suspended turnoffs for customers. It was the start of the pandemic. We did continue to hear how important it was for customers to be able to wash their hands. That was key to fighting this pandemic, amongst other things. So we didn't think it would be the right thing to do to shut it off and make people unable to wash their hands. In addition, there was certainly a large financial impact. People lost their jobs, and it made it difficult. All of our other operations went on 24/7. We were blessed that we didn't have a lot of impact through employees testing positive. We probably had more of an impact over the last month than we did the entire previous time. And those were typically employees that are not vaccinated. But we did see some financial impacts. We lost about $2 million in commercial account revenues, because during that time businesses shut down. Some went out of business. Some, as some of the restrictions got lifted, ramped their business back up. I will tell you, the interesting thing with commercial accounts, we don't have anybody really in arrears. The amount of commercial accounts in arrears in March of 2020 was more than the commercial account arrears are now. So they've all caught up on their billing and their accounts. Whereas with the residential customers, we did see an increase because we stopped the turnoffs. Some people realized, okay, well, if they're not going to turn me off, I'm not going to pay my bill, whether they could have afforded to or not. A lot of them took advantage of that. And we did see, at the peak, we saw about a $2.2 million increase in customer past due balances. That is actually down now to about 1.5 million, because we started, as of May 1st, we started back in with turnoffs. And I thought when we did that, we'd get this just massive amount of customers coming in screaming, so they really haven't had it. We've worked with some customers that have needed payment programs. Other customers just came in and paid their balance. So it's like they knew once that was going to happen, all right, time to play catch up. So it's actually been a lot better than I thought it would be. I thought, we'd be dealing with a lot of angry customers, but, staff has worked with the customers that needed the help, and other ones have just come in and paid. So we have seen some minor delays in construction projects, and now probably over the last 6 to 8 months, we're seeing a lot of increase in material costs. Surprisingly, a lot of the increase in costs and delays in producing things was due to that large freeze in Dallas, in Texas, this past year. That hampered a lot of the supply chain. So we're seeing some impact on that. I know wood has gone up significantly in price. Concrete has gone up. So we're dealing with some price increases, and we're trying to work with contractors to say, hey, if you know prices are going up, buy the material. We'll pay you for the stored material. Just get it in, get it at the good price, so we don't have to deal with that. So that's really been the impact for COVID. And we're sort of coming out of that. And luckily, because of the different stimulus plans, I think the customers, had some money to put towards their bill and get current. So I don't anticipate, even with this resurgence, to have any kind of issue to where we have to go back to suspending turnoffs. Customers are paying their bill, and even the ones that the average bill after almost 15 months of not having turnoffs, the average past due balance was about $400. So it wasn't like every customer had $10,000 they had to pay off. It was really a reasonable amount as an average number. So that was really the impact from the COVID. So in summary, we continue to provide cost-effective, reliable service and competitive rates to our customers, and continue, with the board's blessing, to be proactive in our construction and our renewal and replacement of our infrastructure. And because of that, we continue to forecast manageable and affordable future rate increases to fund our operating capital and debt costs. And with that, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy.
I'm sure there will be many questions. I have a good deal. However, before we get into questions, as you know, because we're starting today, we started today at 11 instead of 10, we will be working through lunch. So lunch has arrived, actually arrived about 15 or 20 minutes ago. We would like to eat it while it's warm, so what I will ask the members to do is we will take about a 10-minute break now. I will ask you to go get your food and bring it back here, and then we'll eat and work, so we can hopefully wrap up by what we were planning on around 2:30. Hold on. Commissioner Bogan has just texted me after texting me earlier and saying it's all ready, has just texted me now saying that they're bringing it up now. Okay, so we'll start questions and then we'll do that. Let me ask you, sir, a couple questions.
Okay.
First, on the sewers. I chair the Water Advisory Board and am the incoming chair of the South Florida Regional Planning Council, so we've dealt with a lot of these issues at both of those. First of all, I was confused on your map, and Commissioner Furr, I thought Hollywood was the largest unsewered area. If you can go back to that, I saw almost none of Hollywood showing as unsewered. If you can go back to the map of what is and is not sewered. Okay, go one more forward.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
okay. Oh, this is.
This is just our service areas. This is the one you'd be looking at, so you could see the yellow in the Hollywood.
That explains.
Okay.
Okay, so I see a lot of Hollywood, a lot of Davie, almost all of Southwest branches. that South County, a little up around Coconut Creek too, but South County seems to be the biggest area.
Yes.
Okay. I know that we had passed a little while ago a amendment to the rural ranches area exception, saying that now they have to hook up if there's new construction and there's lines available. To what extent do you think that will improve, or is that just not going to do very much?
No, I mean, I think it will, because I think previously, they were some of the more outspoken, vocal people saying, hey, you know, the county rule said if it's a rural area, they would be exempted from the connection requirements, and certainly, you know, even on the previous rule, that there was really no enforcement. The enforcement was through, I think, the health department. So you know, if I had customers and I just put in a $20 million sewer system and half of them said, we're not going to connect. Now, what we would do is, after a certain amount of time, we'd start billing them based on their water consumption as if they were connected. So they're paying for something that they're not using. But as far as any type of actual enforcement, fines, stuff like that, we were helpless. So I think that's huge, Mayor. You know, because that's going to be one of the ones. And some of those are tough because some of those houses are set back 300 feet off the road. So you've got to whoever comes in with the sewer there is going to have to come in with a pretty deep sewer, because your laterals have to rise up a significant amount of distance to serve those properties. But certainly having that, you know, taking that exemption out is a game changer as far as getting those people connected. Once somebody says, hey, we're going to go in and serve those areas.
Okay. If you go back again, the one slide,
Okay.
we have had extensive discussions on just how difficult it's going to be, and we have thus far no resolution on areas like Hollywood and Davie to do the connection,
Yeah.
simply because of the cost, where last I heard, they're probably averaging around $20,000 per connection. And is there anything that you guys have in mind? Because I'm not aware,
Yeah.
and Commissioner Furr, this has been discussed, we've discussed this at both SFRPC and at the Water Board with you, I believe.
Yeah.
And that, you know, just the cost is so high, we're just still not sure how we're going to ever get
Yeah,
this
because you're
done.
never going to get that payback from those customers, you know, and
Right.
your other customers are going to have to, you know, see increases. No, you know, it's been difficult. I mean, look, I mean, thanks to you guys have always been very good about saying, hey, whatever you need to do this, you know, even if it's not the most cost effective, it's the best thing for the environment, do it. The other ones have claimed, you know, hey, we don't have the money, we can't do it. Now, I will tell you this, EPGM says some of Hollywood on this map might have been done, but they haven't gotten the data from Hollywood on it. So it's still going to be a lot, because we know Hollywood is not. But I'll give you a great example, Mayor. If you look at Cooper City, the one yellow part of Cooper City, directly below that is the Brian Piccolo, the South Regional well
Well
field.
fields,
Okay? And we've had, and I don't have definitive proof, but my gut instinct tells me, we had an E. coli hit in one of our wells once, and that came directly after heavy rains, and the area just north of that is all septic tank in Cooper City. And it's the worst location to have septic tanks. But, you know, and we've said, guys, you know, this is impacting our region, but there's been nothing. So unless the state turns around and frees up this huge pot of money, which I don't
they
think is
will.
going to happen, it's going to be an ongoing thing, unless at some point, you know, the county can say, hey, here's the mandate. You will have septic tanks done by 2030, regardless of cost, get it done. And I don't know if that, you know, the board has authority to do that, but it's tough, you know, and you see it's down in that south area is the most. The rest of the county is pretty good. But
Is that Plantation Acres I see up in Plantation? Or which?
I don't know what area specifically that is. It might be.
There's two there. All right, two other quick questions. On the biosolids, my understanding is currently most of those are being sent to Palm Beach Farms, and we've been told at the joint South Florida / Treasure Coast Regional Planning Councils that they're talking about not taking them in Palm Beach any longer. If so, what are we going to do with them?
Well,
if our
ours
only
actually go
source of
north.
using them?
Ours go north of Palm Beach. But I know Palm Beach and even parts of Martin County tried to do moratoriums on, no more. But the site that we go to is still, approved to do. One of the things that the state did with some rule changes is, okay, you can't spread it if the water table is so close to the top, because then you're going to leach out some of those nutrients. And that's why ultimately we've got to try to look at a program that's going to allow us to be away from the land farm. Right now, that's the most convenient, but it's probably not always going to be there. There's going to be some. But the problem is, if you go from Class B to even Class AA, you still have the nutrient concerns, which is really what Palm Beach and Martin County, that's their concern, that it's getting in the water, it's going into these lagoons and stuff like that, and creating the algae
There have
blooms.
been extensive discussions at the
So
planning councils on
B
this.
versus AA doesn't help that, So we've got to look at certainly long-term solutions, on what we can do.
And Commissioner Furr has been one of the people taking the leads on the issue of involving the nutrient loads.
Sure.
Because, again, on a regional level, it has been a huge problem. So, and we could discuss that longer. Last question, there was nothing on here on ocean outfalls. Refresh my recollection, is that a county issue, or is that just for the cities?
It's an issue really for Broward County, because of our North Regional, we operate in outfall, and Hollywood, and they operate in outfall out of the South Region, wellfield. None of the other wastewater treatment plants operate the outfall, they all do deep injection well. But with us, we are in compliance. We will be ready on 2025, or even possibly before, starting to scale it back even further. Once we ramp up our reuse customers, because we're gonna meet the reuse element of that legislation, we will be able to start to, move, less out there. We've already
Everything to deep well
reduced.
injection?
We've already reduced we've already reduced the ocean outfall flow, because one element of the rule was, hey, by 2018, you needed to have in place advanced wastewater treatment. If not, you had to have an equivalent reduction in nutrients going to the outfall. And we achieved that equivalent reduction in nutrients by, one, cutting back some of the flow, and two, doing a treatment process that reduces the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus.
But Hollywood has not done that.
No, Hollywood has not done that. I'm not even sure. At one point, they produced a letter saying, hey, they don't have to abide by the reuse, but I don't think that was the case.
Okay. Commissioner Furr, again, and I've had the discussion and the Water Advisory Board as well, that the deep well injection is the least bad way of dealing with it under current technology. But that's not a good way, it's just least bad, because we still don't really know what happens with the deep well. But that's enough for now. Commissioner Bogan, were you coming to tell us we should go now? You let us know. Okay. Additional questions? Commissioner Furr.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that presentation. That was very good. Good to see a lot of that stuff being done. And it's amazing how you're being able to do it on such a good price for our customers. I do have a couple of issues. And I know that, I know we didn't go to AWT because it was so expensive. But it does, given what it has been, what we've seen with the coral reefs, et cetera, we know that a lot of the things aren't getting as cleaned out as much as we'd like. Pharmaceuticals, all those kind of things. All that kind of stuff's still getting in the water. And I guess at some point I'd like to hear how because I know, yes, we're in compliance. I understand that. That doesn't mean it's the best. We just had a very good presentation at the South Florida Regional Planning Council from all the utility directors, from Monroe, here, Palm Beach, and all of them kind of acknowledged that, yeah, we're in compliance and we're doing that, but it's not the best. It's not really the best thing to do. How do we get to that point? Because at some point, what we're doing is we're still putting a lot of stuff out in the ocean. That is, and we do not know quite what's killing all the coral reef off. We don't know what's causing some of that. But you can't help but think that some of that stuff that, we clean the water pretty well. We do it's good enough for reuse. But we do know that there's a lot of stuff still going out there.
Commissioner, what was really enlightening to me when NOAA did their study on it, okay? And yes, we don't know for sure. What is that tipping point that's causing the algal blooms, the corals to die off? Certainly climate change, some nutrient issues. But the biggest enlightening thing to me was when they studied the Hillsborough Inlet and the flow coming out of Hillsborough Inlet, the pathogen levels were just off the chart. And I don't know if that's because there was a lot of septic tanks along that, Hillsborough Canal corridor. I'm not really sure, it's just all runoff and stuff like that, but it was significant. We've certainly cut back the amount that we've put out. I think at one point we were doing, I want to say like 34 million gallons a day, and I think it's down somewhere in the ballpark of 22, depending on, how much flow and if we get a lot of rains. But if we get a lot of rains, now the water's even more diluted and more fresh than, with the other things. So, ultimately, we are going to be putting out, and as soon as we start getting those customers on reuse, if we get 10 million gallons of new customers on reuse, that's 10 million gallons less that we'll put out through the outfall, So,
I guess at some point I would like to hear what that cost is now. I don't know if it's gone up or down. It's probably gone up for a real advanced water treatment plant, because they have done that now down in the Keys. They had to, and it's been very successful.
Of course, their
Whole
population is
different
70,000.
scale of operation.
yeah.
Whole different scale, and we know that. But they have seen a pretty big difference in water quality.
And they have really extremely shallow injection wells, so
Right.
it was really important for them to do that.
Yeah, they had some, and like Hollywood, they did have to their way of complying was to go to deep well injection.
Yeah.
And like the mayor said, we don't know where that goes. And we don't know when that fills up.
Yeah.
We don't know. And it's a waste of a lot of fresh water,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yep. No, I agree. Everybody, to me, the one thing that was frustrating to me is when that ocean outfall legislation kicked in, that it punished us with outfalls, but didn't make anybody else that put it down in the ground to do reuse.
Right.
Fort Lauderdale probably could do reuse and have a ton of areas to send it to. All these other utilities, and it just takes that much more fresh water off on their water side. But, unfortunately, I think it was easier just to target the outfalls and make us.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where we have to think kind of a little bit broader here, because we actually have to think in terms of how do you recharge the aquifer to prevent the saltwater intrusion. And if we just keep throwing all the fresh water either down in the ground or out in the ocean, all we're doing is making that, which is a whole nother issue, making it much bigger. So
Well-
if there's a way of treating the water better and at the same time recharging the aquifer, it seems like more like a win-win.
Yeah, and I agree, and we operate the water control districts up in the north end, and part of their function is to move water into the secondary canal systems to try to keep that groundwater table up, to keep the saltwater intrusion away.
Right.
And the benefit to the reuse is more people that use reuse and less that they're using potable water to irrigate their lawn is going to keep those levels in the ground higher, and that's what's going to keep the saltwater from coming in.
Right.
So they're all married.
You had mentioned about that we buy some water from Hollywood, and I know that the Hollywood water has such a high saline content that they can't do reuse in the same way. Does that prevent us when we're buying it from them?
We actually have not bought any reuse from them. The
Oh.
water we're buying from them is potable, but it's their reuse. When their water goes to their treatment plant, the chloride levels are so high.
Right.
And I will tell you, we had some, borderline high chloride levels, and when we replaced the sewer system on Hillsborough Mile, it took a significant amount, because we had some areas there where the pipe was just letting the seawater, groundwater flush in. So we've dramatically reduced our chlorides, because that was one of the things Palm Beach said, hey, we'll take the reuse from you, but you can't have chlorides to where the golf courses are going to think that this water is going to burn and kill their grass.
Right.
So we don't, knock on wood, have that problem right now.
With regard to the biosolids, the mayor mentioned a lot of that, but have we looked at pelletization in terms of being able, because then you don't have to, you might have a different market for it.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that. I think the problem, though, is there's still a lot of utilities that are doing that. So you can pelletize it and say, okay, now you can do it as fertilizer, but there's not as many still areas because there's still a nutrient issue. Now, if you can pelletize it and burn it, that's a potential, but that's a large facility and you've got to really get that dry. Our option is, hey, if we can go to AA, then it could be put in landfills because it's no harm. It's just nutrients in the landfill and there's a liner, so those nutrients aren't going to get to the groundwater. They'll probably eventually get down into the leachate and come back to a treatment plant. But we're not discounting anything. I want to have something to where, from a long-term perspective, we don't have to worry about every 3 years, hey, are we going to get nailed on this bid for land farming? Or can we get a solution that, and we thought we had one with waste management, but a company that was doing composting and other works up at the Okeechobee, they ended up not partnering with them, and right now they have a composting facility for the biosol, but they're totally at 100% capacity. I think they take it from, Naples, and we've reached out to them, they're like, sorry guys, we have no capacity in our composting. So we're looking at it, and I think the benefit would be is, hey, let's get all these wastewater treatment plants in Broward County together and see if we can come up with a collective solution, just like we did with the C51.
Right, yeah, that'd be good. Because I have seen what has happened on some of those, like Blue Cypress Lake
Yeah,
was a really bad example.
yes,
Of what happened when it was put on the ground. So you had probably one of the cleanest lakes anywhere in Florida.
yeah.
And suddenly it had its problems.
No, that was a bad situation.
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm glad, can you distribute the white paper on the?
Yes, yeah,
Renaissance?
we'll distribute that to the board.
I'd like to see that.
Sure.
And the amount of money that we're putting forth toward the septic, can you send that, how we're doing that?
Sure,
I
yeah.
guess that's for the CARES money?
Yeah, well, we got 21 million in CARES, and then I think for those remaining 2,500 tanks, the estimate's 117 million to get all those tanks out, because some of them aren't as cost effective. The big target is that area by Perry Airport that,
Right,
we
right.
know
And I
about.
hear a lot from my residents. So if I could just hear
Sure.
how we're doing that.
Yeah, I can give you a breakdown of how we calculated the costs, and, and also get you the white paper.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you see Commissioner Furr asking a lot of the same questions I do, it's because we attend a lot of the same
Sure,
meetings,
sure.
all of which are sunshined
Yeah.
and in public. At this point in time, I've now been informed that lunch is in fact ready. So we'll break for 10 minutes. When I come back, I've seen Commissioner Holness and Vice Mayor Udines hands up, and I will call on them in that order. But in the meantime, we'll break only, get your food, bring it right back here, and we'll be back in 10 minutes.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you. Senator Rich, you don't have to go eat necessarily right now, but that's up to you.
Yeah, no, I thank for that permission.
The meeting is now called back to order. This is a working lunch. So, Vice Mayor Udine, you're recognized, sir.
Most of my questions were asked from the things we discussed on the South Florida Regional Planning Council, but just quickly, the NSID, that litigation's all resolved.
It's all resolved. We entered into settlement agreement a couple of years ago, and by the end of this year, we should be able to give them notification that the reuse is ready for them to tie in, set their meter, and then distribute it out to the Wedge properties.
That's the reuse pipe that's going down Hillsborough?
Yeah, that's the reuse pipe that went along Locks Road.
Okay, and that will settle everything that we have with them, and we can move forward
Yep.
productively. That's all I have. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Commissioner Holness, you're recognized, sir. Commissioner, can you speak up a little bit?
Good night.
My question is brief. With the CARES funding that we have, for those who are behind in their utility bills, aren't we able to use some of that funds to help them catch up on their payments?
I would probably defer to the county administrator. My understanding is if it's a rental, if they're a tenant and as part of a rental, they can use the rental assistance funds for their utility bills, but I don't know about if they're a homeowner.
That's my understanding too, but they're updating the advisory constantly, so we're constantly watching it to make sure that anybody that we can get qualified, that we do. So I'll check it out, but they're tying it to the whole, yeah.
And Bertha, there's, if any rental payments, there's really someone really good to talk to, Natalie, she's really good to talk to, she'll get that handled.
Okay, Dr. Sharif, you're recognized, ma'am.
I have a question as well, Mr. Chair, Mr.
They
Mayor.
always say it when you take that bite of food, right?
Right, okay, okay.
So my question was in regards, I had a couple of people that they're landlords of multiple properties, single-family homes, and have not been receiving rent for over a year and a half. Came up and said that they're having some difficulty navigating our program. And I just want to know, do we have anything specific for people who own like 5 or 10 homes that they're renting, like to have that as a business?
Dr. Sharif, are you asking about water, or is this the county administration?
Yeah, this one is just really about the water system, so I'll follow up with you
Okay.
on
So,
the other.
but they're still paying all of that.
Mm-hmm.
The person who owns the house is still paying all of that, the water and the utilities. So we have anything for that too?
Well, there's a lot of our customers have tenant accounts, okay? And some of them we did revert back to the owners, but then we're putting them back in the tenant's name now that we're going back to turn-offs. So it takes it away from that. I have heard some examples of where tenants have gone for the assistance, and they said, as part of that program, you had to have the buy-in from the landlord, and the landlord said no. I don't know if it's their way to try to get them out and maybe be able to rent the property for more money. I don't know, but I know I've heard anecdotally some of those type cases. But, we're working with, whether it's a tenant or an owner or landlord, we'll work if there's past due to do a payment arrangement and try to, keep them in service.
Thank you.
Are there, Senator Rich, you're recognized, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. I just had a question, Alan, about funding issues. You mentioned about CARES and American Rescue. So I know this has not made it all the way through, but certainly through the Senate, the infrastructure bill. Have you done any, looking into that or research into that? Because my understanding was that there's supposed to be money in there for, counties and so forth with regard to infrastructure, and sewers would fall into that category.
We have
Would that
some
be a
of
way
it's
of looking
come-
at some other funding?
Senator, this is Burke. I can answer that. So, the last Rescue Act funding that we received, and we received half of the money, 21 million of that we're proposing to provide to our water wastewater system to handle a portion of that, of our system that's down south. So we have this huge area that's unsewered, and we want to get them sewered, so we're using a portion of our monies to provide that support for that program. That then allows us to free up some money to design another section, and hopefully next year, if they give us the money, we'll be able to put some money towards the construction of that sewer. But what we had available, the 21 million, at this point, we're absolutely, that frees up money locally, that allows us to do more design. We'll have shovel-ready projects to go if we get more money.
And hopefully with some of the future money, we can put it towards some of those septic tank eliminations where it's not the most cost effective, where you're looking at 100,000 per property to get rid of a septic tank, so.
That's the point I was making, is, that supposedly, and I know we're a little bit away from this, but, I mean, they have sent out information on the breakdown of the infrastructure fund, so I was just wondering if you had looked at it, to see what might be a possibility for us to use exactly for that, for areas where we really don't have the funding. And I understand that we're using the American Rescue, but I was looking further down the road to the possibility of the infrastructure funding.
Yeah.
And the answer to that is yes, because that's why we want to free up our money to do design work. So if infrastructure money comes down and they're looking for shovel-ready projects, we'll be ready to
We'll be
go,
ready.
because our projects will have been designed and good to go.
Right, just like we are in affordable housing, right, Bertha? Double ready, okay.
Senator Rich, we'll see if we ever get that, the infrastructure bill
We'll see.
passed.
Was she trying to make a joke? I just want to clarify. Was Senator Rich actually making a joke?
So, I said I'll believe it, because right now, if it's linked to the $3.5 trillion bill, which I don't see passing, then,
That's not what I was talking about, no.
Okay, I understand, we'll see.
Yeah.
Ms. Henry, one quick question before I call on Commissioner Fisher. When you said we're looking at that money, is that money being spent just on the ones in the county service area?
That's correct, because the money that we're using
Right.
are the dollars that we just most recently received,
Right.
and each
And then-
municipality received the same
I was
sum
going
money
to say,
to do
so
it.
when the cities come and say, well, we want some of that money, they also have gotten their own direct money.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. Commissioner Fisher, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, and that kind of touched on what I wanted to ask Alan about Lauderdale by the Sea, because they have just that pocket of septic tanks they need to get out, but they need to get the funding from their own funding. The county's not going to help them in any
Yeah.
way, right?
I know, I think at one point the county did dedicate a little bit of money from another non-WWS fund
Right.
for it, but I don't know. In fact, I was asking somebody not long ago about what's happened with that. Has it moved along and stuff like that? But yeah, that was nothing to do with us. We couldn't spend our money there.
Okay, because they're struggling. I know the state was trying to give them some money, and the city was trying to work with it too, so. All right,
The
thank you.
county did I'm sorry, Commissioner, we did allocate some money, and it's probably sitting, waiting for them to get the whole package together. I don't know
Okay, I'll
where
follow-
they are on it.
All right, I'll follow up with that. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions? Any additional questions? If not, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner.
According to my agenda, I believe the port is next.
The port is next.
Mr. Daniels.
Mr. Daniels.
We go right to questions. We're good, that was good, all right.
Thank you for being here today, sir. You're recognized.
Thank you, Senator Geller, Vice Mayor Udine, who I think stepped out for just one moment, maybe to refresh, members of the commission. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you this afternoon for my second budget presentation, my second pandemic-based budget presentation. And I do look forward to the opportunity to be able to be before you in the years to come and move beyond pandemic-based recovery into ultimately continued growth for the port and ultimately for the county. Again, it's a pleasure to be able to be here as we do talk about a budget that really is rooted and based in recovery. And you're even going to see during the past few months, as we tell the story today, that we are coming out the other side of this. And even still rooted in the basis of a pandemic, we have been able to show growth, and we've been able to set the stage for recovery that certainly is going to be strong, and we feel we will be stronger coming out of the pandemic and out of the other side. A couple of the current conditions, and we can talk about this, and the notes that you see there, I'm actually going to be able to correct some of those based on some of the growth that we've had in the last few months. As many of you know, since March of last year, of course, cruise has been shut down. But on June 26th of this year, Port Everglades served as the background for the first U.S.-based revenue cruise for the industry. When the Celebrity Edge departed Terminal 25 with approximately 1,100 passengers on board. Within that, our containerized cargo continues not only to stabilize but grow. And during the pandemic, we fell below 1 million TEUs, but we are very confident that we are going to approach somewhere around 1,050,000 TEUs, and we continue to see growth there. While in June, we saw the second highest total of TEUs to move through the port, just below 2018. July was even better, as the port set a record with the strongest July ever, with more than 91,000 TEUs moving through the port. Overall TEU counts are up 9%, and this is through July.
TEU?
I'm sorry, 20-foot equivalent unit, which is the standard measure of a container. And we talked about this other day. We live in the world of acronyms, so I think we understand that. But again, it's a 20-foot equivalent unit container. Overall TEUs through July are up 9% year over year, and down only 2% when you consider compared to 2019, which is the last true full year that we had before going into the pandemic. Our energy sector continues to rebound. And while we are still below 2019 levels at 11%, we're 2% above where we were in 2020. So again, we continue to grow. And a lot of that is fueled, no pun intended, by the work that's going on with what Mark is doing at the airport, as well as the continued growth and strength of the market down in Miami at the airport, as well as our fueling operations where we end up fueling up as far north as into Palm Beach. So again, while we're still dealing with the pandemic, we are very well on the road to recovery. You can take a look at total operating revenue by month from the beginning of the pandemic in March of 2020 and where we stand in June and July of this year. So certainly you see as we hit the pandemic, we were extremely strong, and in many areas such as containers, in many areas as well as a cruise, we were going to set records, annual records for the port. Certainly we all know what happened, but when you saw it dip all the way down into August of 2020, you saw that was the low point. I will not say that it was 2 years after or 2 months after I arrived here, but it was 2 months after I arrived here. So if you want to blame the new guy, you can certainly do that. But I think what you can also do is see that the staff worked to help with organic growth opportunities to allow our partners at the port to be able to rebound. And we have shown a stabilization and a strength that continues to move through. And I think as we move in the next year and even beyond, you're going to see those months end up at a record level. Outlook for the next fiscal year. You take a look, the port is experiencing improvement in the majority of our business lines. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes, because while we have always been seen as a cruise and a cruise first, then an energy and cargo really second and third, moving back and forth, we're going to talk about the fact that there's really a fourth leg to the port stool. And we're also going to be able to show some of the areas where we see increased growth as the port begins to move more into even a greater level of diversity. But with the return of cruise lines in June of 2021, we are experiencing a modest recovery in our cruise revenues. Now, this is typically our slower part of the year. And so we only have 30 cruises that between now and the end of the fiscal year are being sold. Nothing new to us because our summer months tend to be lower, the lower part of the year. But we have 441 cruises that are on sale for next year, after a recent announcement this week with another line that's coming in with some additional cruises. And that's even changed from when we provided this to you, which is 435. Still well below where we typically are on an annual basis, but still a sense of recovery as we continue to move and as we continue to work with the lines. I think a significant portion of that, and an area where we will see a little bit of a change in the cruise mix, Carnival Corporation. As you're aware, last year, we did modify and amend the agreement with them. Part of that was reducing their minimum annual guarantee, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that the Carnival Sunrise and the Carnival Breeze, which had been utilizing Port Everglades, were going to be deployed elsewhere. Now, I'm very pleased to say that in working with Carnival Corporation, we do intend to see a stronger program with Princess, as well as Holland America. So while the mix may change a little bit, I think in time we are going to see full recovery. Containerized cargo continue to stabilize. Total TEUs, we will be back above 1 million TEUs this year. And with some of the discussions that we are having, we do feel that we are going to be able to move that beyond 1.1 million going into the future. The port is projecting a total of 118 million barrels of petroleum products to move through the port. And that is, as you look back for comparison's sake, that is equivalent to the 2018 level. So again, we are starting to see that recovery, and we are starting to see those recoveries to the point where we're getting above pre-pandemic levels. Again, though the pandemic has resulted in unexpected financial challenges, we're now able to manage our way through many of those challenges, and to the point where I spoke about before, where we really are a truly diversified port operation. One of the most diversified that you're going to see anywhere in the United States, and dare to say, one of the most diversified in the world. With energy, our cargo operations, cruise, and real estate. Again, we had talked about that a little bit last year, but that's become an extremely strong part of what we do with managing our real estate assets. And for comparison's sake, and I have had the opportunity to talk with my counterparts, with Juan down in Miami, Captain Murray up at Port Canaveral, they are in dire straits in many respects. Port Canaveral, which approved a revenue budget last year in excess of $100 million, submitted an amendment and approved it down into the $30 million category. They're having a difficult time meeting their debt service. And while we've had difficulties in managing the expectations, the strong expectations we have for our operation, we've been able to manage our way through it. Why? Because of the decisions that have been made at this level and by Port Administration to maintain a level of diversity. And the strategy as we're moving forward, and that's strengthening our organic growth. Making sure that the MSCs of the world, the FITs, the PETs of the world, all of those that are already at the port have the resources necessary to be able to grow, and ultimately that means more revenues for us. Again, once the economy improves, we do feel that we are going to see increased levels of containers and cargo moving through. The decision that was made by this body to approve the acquisition of the 3 Super Post-Panamax trains are already paying dividends. And in the next month or so, we'll be bringing forth an amendment to the ZPMC contract, and if approved, would allow us the opportunity to move in the direction of purchasing 3 additional cranes. They are paying dividends. We are seeing the larger vessels that are coming in. The container counts, the ship moves are increasing. And as we're talking with the shipping lines, they're oftentimes speaking with us and saying, can you handle this size of vessel? It's a good position to be in, but we're not fully there as of yet. Port stands ready for our cruise operations. just an absolutely incredible parking garage, approximately $120 million. It's going to look great with vehicles in it, and when it's generating revenue at that point. Now, that being said, we are working with the Convention and Visitors Bureau about the potential utilization of that facility to be able to support the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show. Again, entities within Broward County being able to work together, revenue coming into the port to supplant some of the revenue that we're losing right now. We do feel going into October and November, when Terminal 2 will be in use, primarily by Princess, that we will start to see the revenue coming back in the parking. You take a look at a summary of forecasted operating revenues for 2022. We are projecting a little bit more than $128 million. And you can see by that graph the truly four legs of the port's diversification stool. Where in the past we've had cruise as number one, while it's difficult to see it down projected at only $24 million, it's awfully enlightening for me to be able to see that now in the third position and for the port to be able to grow its revenue. You're seeing a rebound and an increase proposed for petroleum and in our energy sector, containerized cargo stabilized, cruise at number 3 at 19% with $24 million, and real estate at $17 million plus, representing 14% of the port's revenue stream going into next year. And in a few minutes, I'll be able to talk about bulk and break bulk. While the port has been known as one of the top container ports in the nation, we're now seeing new lines of business. Part of it led by the fact that we are the yacht handling capital in the world. Throw in there other bulk opportunities, and all of a sudden you have a new line of business that's only making us stronger and more diverse. When we take a look at our revenue and budget comparison, and administration asked us to be able to put in another column that pointed to fiscal year 19 adopted budget, so you have a true understanding as to when the port was extremely strong pre-pandemic, going into what we approved last year for the 21 budget, and now what we're requesting and recommending for 22. You can see an adopted budget all in at about $163 million in fiscal year 19. Fiscal year 21, you saw an adopted budget, and the one that we're working through right now, that is $108 million, significantly less, primarily driven by the loss of cruise revenue. And what we are proposing and recommending is a budget that grows by 19% revenue base at $128 million. And you can see the recommendation and where you see the increases that come back in. Now, what we did in recommending and having an adopted budget of cruise of $12.4 million, we will be coming back to you and working through OMB on the supplemental, as that will be now down less than $2 million. So there are areas where we're going to be coming back in with a budget amendment on the supplemental, but we do have an opportunity through the ARPA funds that were allocated from the state and FDOT to be able to do a true up with that. So we're in a very, very good position through the rest of 2021 and setting the stage for 2022. But you can see the recommended cruise at $24 million, a 94% increase over what was proposed last year. Petroleum at a 12% increase, and again, we're continuing to see growth. And those of you that have had an opportunity to be down on the port during the last year or so are seeing improvements that are being made in the Slip 1 rehabilitation and expansion project. You're seeing $75 million invested by Vice Energy in a brand new jet fuel facility. You're seeing a significant amount of private investment made in the rack system and the piping system in anticipation of a large-scale project where we're going to be able to expand Slip 1 and to be able to handle 2 Aframax-sized vessels simultaneously. And if the importance of the port was not known before in South Florida, I say 2 words: Colonial Pipeline. Is that South Florida, while still many of us and many people in South Florida panicked, not knowing the impact of Colonial Pipeline, when you have the leaders of both Broward County and Miami-Dade stating, we do not need to panic because of the fuel that flows through Port Everglades, that says something. And certainly the importance pre-storm, post-storm, Colonial Pipeline or other, I don't think we could have had a better endorsement. And that was the first time I've ever been on social media and it went viral. So I still don't know what that necessarily means, but I think it was pretty good in this instance.
It means it got COVID.
But again, you can see stabilization, you can see growth. You see real estate, again, as I had mentioned before, and the importance of the real estate is about stable. Bulk and break bulk, projected up 34%. Project cargoes, yachts, our bulk operations. Again, we're seeing incredible growth in that market. The parking, again, we're projecting it to be fairly small next year, but an 87% increase over what was proposed. And then you see some others. So again, a $20 million recommended increase, 19%. And we feel very good with that budget. And we do feel that the revenues actually are being calculated on a very conservative basis. As we talk about our expenses, and you can take a look in there again, some of the primary areas are law enforcement, security, fire, and rescue represents 33% of the overall budget for the port. Personnel at 23% at $24 million. Crane operations, again, when we're bringing on additional equipment, you obviously are going to see increases in the expenses. But the arrangement that we have with GFC is absolutely fantastic. Great professionals. And I can tell you, those cranes are working extremely well right now. And for the next level of container operations and shipboard operations, I tell you, we couldn't have made a better investment in that respect. You see repairs, maintenance, and you see some of the increases associated, for instance, with repairs and maintenance. One of the big reasons is, as we calculated the budget that we're currently in, we knew that we would have to make cuts. We made cuts in deferred maintenance as much as possible. But we did not want to cut to the bone and put ourselves in a position where we could not get out of it because we were pushing maintenance aside on certain areas where it would take us years to be able to come out of. But you can see the level of proposed increase. Fire, EMS, there's still some areas on our cost calculations and our expense calculations we still need to be able to solidify. Certainly the negotiation with BSO that we should be able to bring back for ratification fairly soon. And still some unknowns because we just had the RFP issued regarding our security operations. While we do have certain calculations in there to be able to provide you with a budget, we don't know ultimately what that cost is going to be, but I think we're in the right direction. Again, crane operations with the increased amount of activity associated with our current cranes and the new ones. Repairs, maintenance, materials on a percentage basis is extremely strong. And again, then you can see the rest of that. So we are proposing an expense line of $104 million. That would be a 14% increase over the previous year. We have the ARPA money that we have been fortunate enough to be able to be presented with, approximately $58.2 million as part of a $250 million program that came out of ARPA funding, went down to the state under the recommendation of Secretary Thibault to the governor, and the governor's inclusion of approximately $258 million. That was whittled down to $250 million, of which Port Everglades received in excess of $58.2 million. We're still working with FDOT, and we'll be meeting with them next week as part of the Florida Ports Council meeting to go through some of the details on exactly how that money can be utilized. We are projecting at this point, and again, I say at this point, unless there's a change from FDOT in their calculations and how we can deploy that, of looking at a true-up of approximately $13.7 million that would be requested out of that $58 million. We have several years to be able to spend that money out, so if we can't spend it all at this point, we will be submitting requestment for reimbursement from those FDOT funds going into subsequent years. You can see on the 2022 to 2026 capital program, several projects This is lower than it was projected to be last year. Some of the projects have just been moved into the future. You can still see monies that will be allocated for the deepening and widening project, bulkhead repair and replacement programs, entrance channel, the I-595 flyover in partnership with FDOT, as well as we have put money in there to be able to isolate that down for the possibility of acquiring three new cranes on top of the ones that we just received and are in operation as we speak. A couple major capital project updates as we continue to move through. And again, though we went through a pandemic, it didn't mean that we isolated down and stopped these projects. The Southport Turning Notch, $471 million, the largest single infrastructure project ever undertaken by the port, is 68% complete by schedule, 78% complete by cost. There's less than 200,000 cubic yards of material that need to be dredged out of the turning notch. It's truly getting into the excited time. In February, March of next year, they will be removing the sheet pile. That allows us the opportunity, a couple months after that, to be able to move vessels into the western portion of that so that we can take berth 30 out of operation so that we can do the relieving platform and other work that's going to be necessary. We're currently continuing operation, or our discussions on the acquisition of a TIFIA loan, and we'll be working diligently during the next few weeks, hopefully to be able to come to an agreement with the Department of Transportation, negotiating terms and conditions. So I'd mentioned the certificate of occupancy on a wonderful $120 million parking garage. It really is fantastic, and when we stand here and say it's a technologically advanced parking garage, it sounds a little bit counter to what you typically would see, but from the utilization of alternative energy sources to the parking management system, and to the movement of people from the parking garage on the 5th floor, the moving walkways, air conditioned, which gets them up over Terminal 4, drops them down in between Terminal 2 and Terminal 4 for Terminal 2 operations. It really is an absolutely fantastic facility. And all three cranes, they arrived in November, went through several months of commissioning, and they are in operation. A couple of open issues that we have that we'll continue to work through. All of us are going to have to work through the long-term impacts of COVID and the pandemic. The economy has been changed, I think, forever. So we need to be able to adjust to that, and we'll continue to work through that. Law enforcement, fire, and rescue increases. As we finalize the details associated with our contract with BSO, there very well may be some budget impacts associated with that. Worked very diligently, received a great report and an audit from the auditor's office, looking at the previous agreement. It really has provided us with a great base to be able to go into our negotiations. Increases that potentially could be there associated with the RFP for security services. The TIFIA loan is significant because we are prepaying a significant amount of money out of our own pocket that will be reimbursed by TIFIA funds once that is approved. And then finalizing the fluctuating cruise schedule. Something I just read on my way over here, a statement that was made by Michael Bailey, who's the president and CEO of Royal Caribbean, had stated that yes, there are COVID cases that are on board these vessels, but they're in the 0.1 to 0.2% range. When you consider the amount of people that are on board, both passengers and crew, it's still an extremely small amount percentage-wise. But it is something that all of us are ultimately going to have to deal with. With that, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to talk to you today. I'll certainly be willing to answer any questions that you may have. I also want to make sure I point to our staff that has moved down from the back row with Leah, Glenn, and David that worked diligently to allow us the opportunity to be able to put this presentation and the budget together. I think it's a solid budget, conservative on the revenue side as well as on the expense side, and allows us the opportunity to have, I think, a solid margin moving into in the next year.
Thank you. I have a couple of quick questions.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Bogan, it will be our first speaker and the only hand I see up as of now. First, sir, we'll toss a hot potato because why not? One of the reasons, one of several reasons I know that we permitted the, I don't know what to call them, the plague ships, the ships that nobody was permitting to land here. land.
Rotterdam and.
Rotterdam, Zandam and
I
Rotterdam.
know, I remembered that, I was just didn't know how to refer to them. Was because of the strong relationship that Port Everglades has or had with the cruise community.
Yes.
What I'm wondering is, I know that with at least Norwegian cruise lines, that they seem to be locked in a battle with the governor, and I think that the majority of the cruise lines actually agree with them on wanting to have the ability, at least should they choose to require 100% vaccination, which is what overwhelmingly their passengers want. To what extent, if any, has this been making Florida in general and Port Everglades in particular a less desirable location for the cruise lines? I've read that the chair of NCL is talking about, if this keeps up, just moving out of Florida completely, finding another port. I don't believe they sail out of Port Everglades, do they?
They do not. NCL does not. They have visited here before, but no, they are not home ported out of here. They are home ported out of Miami.
Yeah, but I'm wondering to what extent this is poisoning our relationship with the cruise lines.
Well, Norwegian recently sailed, and as you know, they've all taken a little bit of a different approach to how they're working with the governor's office, how they're working with CDC. Or Norwegian took a little bit more of an aggressive stance and sued the state of Florida and the Surgeon General to allow for 100% vaccination on the cruise as well as on the passengers. I believe that they did sail recently out of Miami under such provisions. It is interesting how the lines are working through the issues associated with getting out and not specifically asking the question. If you're going on a Royal Caribbean Group cruise, whether that's with Royal or Celebrity, as you're posed with your cost breakdown, one of the cost components of that happens to be a $159 fee for testing. If you do not require testing, then in fact you are able to waive that $159 fee and show some level of verification that in fact you are vaccinated, so you don't have to be tested. So they ultimately are not asking them the question directly, but they're working around that in a very different way. From what I understand thus far, there have not been any instances where the state has issued a $5,000 fine per passenger per instance. And it certainly has made it difficult for the cruise lines to make final plans to be able to ultimately be able to sail. They are working around it thus far. Norwegian is correct. It's a movable asset. There are opportunities for them to move it out. But Florida is the capital of cruising. Combined with Everglades, Miami, Canaveral, and the other ports, it's going to be tough for them to do that, but it certainly is a valid threat that Norwegian was willing to stand behind until such time when they got when they put the lawsuit and were allowed to be able to have that. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is, why did you cause the slide 2 months after you got here? Okay. Commissioner Bogan, you're recognized, sir.
First of all, I really want to thank you for focusing on the diversity issue, because we had a president of a cruise line come here before COVID, and the president wanted us to expand more and more cruises, and the administration here was really focused on, being diverse, and I now realize how important that was, and I'm glad we did that. I wanted to ask you, so all these cargo ships come to our port, what do we do to protect Broward residents? People get off those ships from Central America, South America, Europe, wherever they're coming from, and how do we know they're not positive?
Right now, they're not getting off the ships, and that's a CBP issue. So they are not being granted shore leave. So they are not in a situation where they are in our population at this time. Have there been cases of COVID on board some of the cargo vessels? Absolutely. And there is a response, and with fire and rescue right on board, they work through the process to be able to, if they're ambulatory, if they need to take them off and get them to healthcare, they are certainly doing that. We've had a couple of ships as well that Coast Guard has not permitted them to depart, and so we have put them in a berth. We've charged them dockage to make sure that we're getting the revenue off of it. But we work with them and ultimately work with the Coast Guard in order to make sure that they are put in a position where their crew's allowed to get healthy again, and that they get into a position where they are no longer COVID positive and they're allowed to depart the port. But we had a vessel here just about a year ago that was here for approximately 30 days because of that situation. And they did not depart. Combination of both Coast Guard regulations as well as their own policies within the organization.
Easy answer, they're not
Yep.
getting off the ships.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Hogan, thank you for
All right,
asking
the
that important question.
third and last.
Yes, sir.
So I heard from port workers who worked on the front lines during the pandemic. Apparently, I heard 4 of them even passed away due to COVID. And I was told that in your little speech here today, you have a note here on the American Rescue Plan Act. And I was told that that might be able to be applied where some of the workers might be able to get, because they were here during the front lines, some type of stipend for the workers. And I didn't know if that was something that's possible.
I'm not entirely sure under the conditions of the subrecipient agreement. On top of that, the eligible spend only goes back to March 3rd of this year. It does not go back to the previous March of 2020. We don't believe that would be something that would be eligible. We can certainly look into it for you and make sure that we can do that and then get back to you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
Were you done, Commissioner?
Yes, Mayor.
Are there any additional questions? Okay, Vice Mayor, I'm sorry, Dr. Sharif, did I see your hand? Okay, Vice Mayor, then followed by Dr. Sharif.
2 things. I just want to thank you in the professionalism of the port. I had the chance to go with all you
Thank you.
guys to learn inside and out how the petroleum aspect works. And
Yes, sir.
it was really fascinating when we get calls from people during a hurricane or during whatever saying, just send more trucks in and open the spigots. It was really impressive to see the
Good.
professionalism
Good.
of how this whole petroleum system works in South Florida. So
Yes, sir.
thank you. I just wanted to follow what Commissioner Bogan said. If there is an ability for the American Rescue Plan money to be used in a way to stipend some of those employees, please look into that, advise us back if there's, because the port was really the epicenter of where this all kind of began in our area. So these employees really took a risk, and if there's a way that they can be retroactively compensated somehow, I think we should look into that, as Commissioner Bogan had mentioned.
We'll bring that back to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor. Dr. Sharif, you're recognized, ma'am.
The best part about having colleagues like them is that we think alike. So I have presented this to the county attorney's office, and they were looking into it, and I was hoping to get some resolution on it because they had come back and given me some more homework to do. So if we could try to come to some solution on that. They had said initially that.
Which issue are you talking about?
I'm sorry.
Retroactive hazard pay.
The retroactive hazard pay for the port workers. So we had started talking about this, and they came back and told me that there was some issues with restrictions on the money. And so ILA is going to have to come back and give them further explanation about what they're trying to do. But right now it's a restriction, but I'm glad that you brought that up as well. And then my second question was for the current. Because of the variants right now and the fact that we have just started the cruise industry back again, are you all working proactively on a plan for the cruise industry so that it doesn't shut down again?
Well, the shutdown again, wow, even to think about that is difficult, but we are thinking about it, and ultimately there is planning for that. The requirements that they're under based on CDC, the agreements ultimately that we have in place, the response plans ultimately that we have in place. It's really meant to limit community spread, but also do everything that's necessary. And as you've heard from many of them, they would rather see more vaccines on there than they would non-vaccinated. So the moves that they're making, moves some of the other countries are making as well. And recently talking with officials from Celebrity, they've indicated that a lot of the islands that they're going into, if you're going to get off the ship and go to the island, you have to be vaccinated, 100%. That's it. So that's bringing them into a position where I think, in a sense, by default, by what they're requiring in the islands, you're going to see more vaccinated people on board these vessels. But the industry is working diligently with CLIA, with the ports, and everybody that we can do everything necessary to contain it, and that we don't end up with the type of spread that would potentially shut down the industry. But it's been referred to as a bubble inside a bubble inside a bubble. Because of the vaccination requirements, because of the crew requirements, and because of the sanitization and practices that they're doing on board the vessel, it's as safe a vacation, and I'm using a quote from Michael Bailey, it's as safe a vacation as you're going to find anywhere.
Okay.
Thank you.
I guess my thought is based on the fact that, it keeps changing from day to day. Our positivity rate is going up within our vaccinated community, and I just want to be prepared because I think that I don't think the governor is going to want to shut down anything, but we've had these issues with vessels coming in with sick people, and they should be coming here to get help if they need help. But just kind of thinking through a strategy on how to allow them to serve people, keep people working, protect the families at the port, and then also, protect the residents that choose to cruise and the visitors, because I think our tourism industry just has taken a tremendous hit off of this. I can't see anymore. They've taken a tremendous hit, and I just, as I see these numbers climbing, I'm just concerned that if we don't have another plan in place, we're going to do something drastic to stop the spread and hurt our industry even further. And while your numbers are rebounding, that is just a serious concern for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharif. Commissioner Furr, followed by Commissioner Bogan.
Thank you. Great presentation, and it is a comfort to see the diversity and
Thank you.
how it's playing out, and it's working to our benefit.
Yes, sir.
3 questions real quick. Timeline on the dredging.
We're working we've received some, not the greatest news, certainly as they continue to look at impacts based on potential and indirect impacts. And we'll be coming back and talking with you and briefing all of you fairly soon once we get the final schedule. We're still working through, and the Corps is working through the draft supplemental environmental impact statement. What they're giving to us now may mean that we won't see a record of decision until sometime well into 2022. So that continues to push it back, and then ultimately that does have financial impacts as well. So you will all be getting a briefing fairly soon once we get the final details from them on what the dredging schedule and cost looks like, because there are implications there, sir.
Okay. Any update on the sand bypass?
Sand bypass for us.
I know that's kind of peripheral to you.
Yeah, it's peripheral for us. I would ask if anybody else, David, if anybody has any impact. I don't have any background on that to update you on that, sir.
Update on Disney?
Well, we continue to go back and forth. There's a couple of, I wouldn't say open issues, but wording issues that we're working on. And we hope to be able to execute that quickly. The timeline on that, they have time requirements that they have to be able to notify where their current operations occur. And if we can come to resolution on a couple of the outstanding issues, their schedule right now would have them starting in the fourth quarter calendar year of 2023. So the negotiations are going well, commercial terms are set, and now we're working on some of the legal aspects of it. And it is I will tell you, it's a thorough review of what's going on right now.
Okay. And just with what Commissioner Sharif was just talking about. You know, with the cruise line, are they able to bring vaccines or monoclonal of those? Can they bring that stuff on board and can they deal with that on board?
They can,
Because some of those things like monoclonal, you know, you need to do it soon. So, but if somebody's out at sea, they don't have access.
they have upgraded all of their medical facilities. They've upgraded the amount of personnel, they've put isolation rooms in, and it's a small hospital on board.
Okay.
So I'm not entirely sure the drugs and material they're bringing on there, but I tell you, it is what they have done. They need to be commended for the investments that they've made in their vessels to make sure that they are in a position where they can render the proper medical aid when those conditions occur.
I mean, you're seeing that being stressed, not only from the governor, but from the president and everything else. And, but I haven't seen it, how transportable it is and how available it might be on
Yeah.
ships where if someone's stranded out there, that might be something to be able to be.
It is one of the things that they do as part of their agreement, depending, because you now have to show up with a negative test.
Okay.
That's something that's fairly new, and that changed midway. Once you're on there, if you start to exhibit, and you go into an isolation situation, let's say you leave Fort Lauderdale and you're on your way to St. Martin, they're going to pull you off the ship there, and they're going to medevac you, medevac the situation, and medevac those people and get them back.
Okay.
So it's really something where the responsibility jumps kind of around, and again, have we seen some that have come in? Yes, they've been in limited numbers in the amount, and they go into a full-fledged response plan in order to be able to handle anybody and getting them off. It even comes down to ultimately not taking them through certain parts of the terminal, but rather bringing them out across the dock to limit the amount and to contain as much as is possible.
If that makes sense, and I don't know if it does, but if we can advocate for that and facilitate that, I think it would make sense.
We'll get there.
I don't know any reason why they wouldn't, because
either.
right now, they could do it intravenously. It was, you had a
Just have
drip,
a transfer.
but now it's it's becoming easier and easier, and the governor is certainly pushing it. And as you all may have seen, we are now providing that service at our CB Smith Park.
Right.
We'll be in another day or so if we haven't started already. But very closely, they have figured out they can handle this in within a 2-hour period and move it along quickly.
I
So I
would
can't
think
imagine that it's not that easy for the ships.
You would think that if passengers knew that would be available, it would provide some level of comfort that they might not have otherwise.
We can certainly ask that question of it may just be a validation of the fact that it's being done, or at least some level of suggestion that occurs within that, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bogan. You're recognized, sir.
Yeah, how far out from the shore is it international waters?
12 miles?
It depends. It's 3 miles off the Atlantic. Then
12,
it's-
yep. It depends on the law, but 12 miles is typically
It's-
in the
it's
international
different
wilds.
in different areas.
International.
Is it 3 miles or 12 miles?
It's,
I've got it.
yeah, the answer is yes, but it also,
Steve,
it's different in
12
the
miles.
Gulf Coast.
It's 12 miles.
12 miles.
I'm just talking about right here. I'm talking about right, so why couldn't, so the governor's order does not apply to ships in international waters, correct?
That would be correct.
So why wouldn't so obviously having passengers with negative tests is important. And so why wouldn't the ships tell everybody, look, when we get to international water line, we're stopping the ship, show us a negative test, or we have a ferry that's going to go and take you back.
We'll throw you overboard.
No, I'm being serious. Why wouldn't
Yeah.
if you were the president, I mean, why don't they try that?
That I don't know. It's a question we can certainly ask.
No, I mean, I
They-
just thought, I mean, if that is really important, I mean, or maybe, Mark Gale is sitting behind you, he could have his helicopter fleet come in and take him off the ship.
Mark, are you prepared to do that? All right, thank you. But again, Commissioners, they found a way around it thus far, and it's it's been successful
And the
to this
governor's
point.
office is not giving him a problem about it?
We are not aware of any situation where there has been any type of interdiction associated with that.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Are there any additional questions? If
Great.
not,
Yes,
Thank you,
I
sir.
have one.
yes.
I have one.
Yes, Senator.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, and thank you for your presentation, Jonathan. Appreciate it. I have a question about the American Rescue Act money.
Yes.
So you said that this budget includes $2 billion in, well, $250 million appropriated for the port's operating grants.
Yes.
So the history of this whole thing has been this money, not only for ports but for everything, has been stuck in Tallahassee, and it's still there, billions of dollars. So I'm just wondering what the guarantee is here, and when is the expiration? When do these funds actually expire? Because there are different dates for expirations.
5 years.
Some are 2023, some are 2026, whatever. This one says on July 29th, the governor announced that they would allocate some of this money that came from the federal government.
Yes.
And that the port is still working with FDOT on the mechanics of how these funds would be accessed. So, you know, how long is that taking, and what is the expiration time for these funds?
We believe it's a 5-year expiration period. So we do have, you know, our initial development of this, as we started to talk about it internally, was to utilize approximately half of it this year and half of it going into next year. With some of the requirements, and because we can only go back to March 3rd of this year, it limits the amount that we can request on the reimbursement for this year, and even moving forward. There are some federal requirements associated with vendor agreements that were not in place when this money was provided to us. So ultimately, we can't use it to reimburse for some of our maintenance and some of the other actions, even going back to March 3rd. We didn't know that was going to be a requirement, so we didn't have it written into our vendor agreements. And the reason we've brought up a lot of these issues as staff and as all the ports with FDOT, and we're going to be having a meeting next week as part of the Florida Ports Council with the Secretary and with his team to further define and clarify some of the conditions under which we can use the money. Right now, the way it is stipulated and why we have suggested about $13.7 million this year for reimbursement, and this could change, would be because we could use it for utilities and salaries and payroll going back to March 3rd of this year. That's the only thing right now that appears to be fairly clear. And until we get further guidance, those are going to be the two areas that we are going to use them in. And until we get the guidance and basically the sign-off and blessing from FDOT that we can use it for other activities, we're not going to go any further into that. It's been much more restrictive than we even thought it would be, as they provided us with background.
Is that the restriction from the Florida Department of Transportation versus what the purpose was when it was, you know, appropriated through the American Rescue Plan?
That's the restriction in the subrecipient agreement from FDOT down to the ports.
Okay, so it's not it's not the feds doing that, it's the state.
It very well may not be, but we know that as a subrecipient and in our subrecipient agreement, as interpreted thus far, yep. Okay, thank you. All right, pass down from Treasury guidance.
Passed down from Treasury
From
guidance.
Treasury guidance, yes.
Okay, so I'm just urging us to stay on top of this because of the restrictions and the barriers that have been placed in terms of accessing this money. And, you know, we've been through it with homeless, with, rental assistance, all kinds of things. So I just would urge us to be, really very wary of this so that we can make sure that we are able to use this funding before it expires.
We can absolutely, you have our word on it, that we will maintain and we will push this issue as much as we can, so that it is not overly restrictive and that we can expend all $58.2 million.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Are there any additional questions? Not, thank you, Mr. Daniels.
Senator, thank you so much. Members of the commission, thank you.
And Commissioner Bogan, the 3-mile limit was the historical limit, which was changed by President Reagan in 1988 to 12 miles. So I'm still relying on my old law school training, which is now obsolete as the
So for the
3-mile
record,
limit.
you were wrong. I just want to make sure we get that.
I was historically accurate, but currently incorrect.
You were mistaken. Okay, I just want to make sure we got that.
Airport, come on down. You're the next contestant. Okay. I'm sorry?
Mr. Gale is going to talk about the prosperity of Spirit Airlines.
Next, the budget is right. Very good, Dr. Schroeder. Well, I am historically correct. I just haven't adopted to the times.
I can't see you, Michael, it's all fogged up.
Yeah, you also had the problem with the glasses fogging. That's why I've gone back
And
to
after
contacts.
Jonathan, us short guys have to bring the mic all the way back down here again like this.
Thank you for being here today, Mr. Gale. You're recognized, sir.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. Pleasure to be in front of you again. Haven't seen some of you over the summer. Happy National Aviation Day. It is a thing.
Did you arrange for this hearing today just to be a national
It is
aviation?
a thing. It was, it's the birthday of Orville Wright, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt actually started it back, I guess, 1940-ish, 39, to recognize the importance of aviation to our society. So, yeah, I did arrange it.
Wait, can I just ask one thing before he starts? If you can answer the date in which the Wright brothers took off, I think then you should get a raise. What is that date?
You mean at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina?
Take off in the Kitty, whatever the name
It's
is.
a Kitty Hawk. They actually launched 4
Kitty Hawk.
times. It was on December 17th, 1903.
Okay, motion to give him a raise.
You didn't plant that question, did you, Commissioner? Okay.
They actually did 4 flights that day, and the last one they crashed and they broke the airplane, and they never flew it again. So, no, but it started us on the right path.
Okay, Mr. Gale.
Okay, here we go.
Let's discuss
Our budget for
So
it.
that you all know, they were from Dayton, Ohio.
They were from Dayton, Ohio. She is absolutely correct.
Thank
County
you, Mr.
administrator
Gale.
knows her
Let's
stuff.
discuss the budget.
Table of contents. We'll go through these things quickly. We'll hit some of the key operating highlights. We really want to talk a little bit about signs of recovery, where we are today, where we think we're going, some comparative data. You'll see us comparing 2021 versus 2019, or even 2022 versus 2019. 2020 and 2021, in some cases, were rough years to compare, and you'll see that in the numbers. We'll go through the financial performance on our income statements, and as well as the revenue and the OpEx. Talk about what our key rates and charges are coming up for FY22. Before I transition over to the capital side of the house, I do want to spend about 3 slides or so just to give you an update on where we are with the master plan. You may recall that we kept our master plan consultant on as the pandemic started to hit, thinking that we might have to revise certain aspects of the master plan if our forecast was going to change what happened to our future. So just a quick update on that, but much more to follow at a later date on those things. And then we'll quickly hit the highlights of the capital program. So some of the key operating budget highlights. Total passenger enplanements for fiscal 22 are expected to be 17.4 million compared to FY19, which was at 18.2 million. FY19 and calendar year 19 was our high watermark. So you can see we're down 4.4%, and as we go through the numbers, you'll notice that we don't have all the passengers back or all the flights back, but we're darn close. Total arriving and departing passengers for FY22 expected to be 34.8 million. On the financial performance, the operating revenue is $355 million, budgeted to increase 15.9% compared to 2019 actuals. But our OpEx is also scheduled to increase by 17.8% compared to the FY19 actual. Our CPE for FY22 is budgeted at $7.99. Still a very, very low rate compared to some of our fellow large hub airports, and particularly in the state of Florida.
But it is higher than where we were at FY 2019. Again, it's a function of an increased debt service that's come online, increased operating expenses, and not as many passengers coming through the facility. The Federal Inspection Services charge is $11.19, higher than what it was in 2019. You'll see a theme in our presentation that while domestic travel is back and back very, very strong, international travel continues to lag behind. We're about 45% behind in international travel right now. We have many of the countries and destinations. We don't have all the frequencies, and that's reflected in the lower numbers as we go forward. We do anticipate that as we start to get past this pandemic, hopefully in the next fiscal year, you'll see international traffic coming back very, very strong. Landing fees will actually be lower, $1.57 versus $1.62. We're taking that directly from the landed weights that we get from our airlines in terms of our forecast. We get all the weight that's supposed to be coming in the fiscal year. We divide that amongst our expenses, and we come up with a landing fee going forward. On the recovery side, so I think you guys know the story very well. In FY20, FLL carried 21.3 million passengers, down from 41% from FY19. You say, well, what does that look like? The first half of the fiscal year, from October 1st up through the end of March, was actually quite favorable. We were pushing a lot of folks through the airport. We did start to take the hit in the March timeframe, which pushed us down that slight 5% compared to FY19. And then the second half of FY20, from April 1st through the end of the fiscal year, is when we took the big hit. Total passengers was only $3.7 million, or 7 million passengers rather, excuse me, down 79% versus the previous fiscal year. I remember, not joking, but making a comment to Mayor Geller, and he asked the traffic. I said we had more tumbleweeds than we did passengers, and he said, we're wrong part of the country for tumbleweeds, Mark. And I said, that tells you how many passengers we had during that time frame. But if you take a look at the next bullet point, the first 9 months of this fiscal year, FLL carried 17.7 million passengers, down 37% versus FY19. But the next three lines in particular, I'd like you to take a note of. First quarter, we were down 51%. Second quarter, 44%. Third quarter, 17%. Fourth quarter anticipated to be down 5%. You can see the numbers decreasing. We're coming back. The last bullet there is a projection, and we do want to put a caveat on that certainly it could be negatively impacted by the Delta variant or any other variants. And we're already starting to see some fluctuations in the look ahead from certain airlines. Southwest had announced that they were being impacted by the variant. Spirit Airlines has announced that they may start to do some scale backs, maybe for different reasons. So that 7.9 million number may fluctuate down, but we're going to keep it where it's at for right now. Good news is I think we were trending very, very strongly in the right direction, and when you compare us to other airports in terms of recovery, we were one of the strongest airports in the nation. Our in-plane passenger comparison, the blue is domestic. The orange is international. You can see the precipitous drop-off from 19 to 20, and it starts to build back up. But in the FY21 forecast, you can see that our international in-plane passengers is still only 2 million, when we really want that number to be up around 3.5 or 4 million. The two bullets at the bottom, FY21 passenger enplanements are forecasted to be 12.8 million. When we double enplanements, meaning we take enplanements and deplanements, the total traffic count for the fiscal year would come in at about 25.6 million. FY22 passenger enplanements expected to grow to 17.4 million, 4.4% lower than 2019 fiscal year. Again, that would bring us in at 34.8 million. Our high water mark was 36.7 million, so we're not far off the pace. Our security checkpoints are always a good way of identifying how busy the airport is. I believe that most, if not all of you, have traveled through our airport in the last either weeks or the last couple of months. You know that it's still a very, very busy place. The blue line at the top represents the screenings that occur at the checkpoint throughout the month, or that's actually a daily average for the month. So you can see in January of 2019 was an average of 50,610 people that were screened at our checkpoint. Stretch that out across the year. The orange line represents where we are in 2021 for those same months. And you can see that the lines are converging. We're getting very close to where we were in 2019. And that is with the fewer international flights. That would bump that line over. And we'll talk about that as we go forward here. Also on the signs of recovery, you can see the important part is on the right-hand side. All our airlines there, our top 10 carriers, year-to-date, October through June of the fiscal year. Spirit was the only one that was actually operating in the black, 3% above in that same time frame, October, June 2019 versus October, June of 2021. When you take the month of June alone, Spirit was well into the black, 37% above where they were in June of 2019. But American and United also were in the black. During the pandemic, we saw some of our legacy carriers start to add some flights between certain cities and Fort Lauderdale that typically they would not serve, and that was folks that were looking to get away, whether it was Cleveland or another location, to come down to a leisure market like FLL, to hit the sun and the sand and the beaches. We were quite attractive. Some of that may dissipate for those legacy carriers as we go forward, and they see the business traveler start to return. They might reposition assets, and we might see that dissipate from some of those carriers. But they're not there yet. They're still acting quite healthy in that regard. During the pandemic, airlines were adding different service, as I just mentioned. So Alaska put in service to San Diego and Portland. United put in service to Boston and LaGuardia and Cleveland. Spirit, several different locations across the board, including several international destinations. Sun Country, Minneapolis. Silver out of Charleston and Savannah.
No.
American.
Commissioner Holness, is that you?
Yep.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I need to mute.
Thank you, Commissioner. Welcome back.
Very good.
I'm sorry.
American.
Please continue.
Thank you, Mayor. American added Boston, LAX, JFK, and Port-au-Prince. And you can see the rest of, some of it is seasonal, but others were not. And we'll see, again, as we come out of the pandemic and some of the traffic shifts back to business traveler, we'll watch this closely to see how it impacts our forecast going forward. FLL had an average of 261 daily departures to 77 cities in the United States, 57 daily international departures to 37 destinations in 19 different countries. That is down clearly from the 2019 level, mostly on the international side. The domestic side is actually pretty close. In fact, it was the same number of cities, a slightly higher average number in 2019. The good news is we have nonstop service to all of our top 50 domestic markets that we serve. We always do the analysis to see if somebody's flying out of this particular market and going to another city in the United States. We can track that to see if they go via a connection. Maybe they fly over Atlanta, maybe they fly over Charlotte, maybe they fly over Dallas. We can see that through some of the software and the systems that we subscribe to. And then we determine whether or not we also have nonstop service that goes to that, depending upon how many passengers are going there. Top 10 carriers, the scheduled, we measure, one of the metrics that we look at in managing the airport is how many, not just how many planes or passengers, but the seat capacity. How many seats are on airplanes? How many airplanes do we have? Sometimes with airplane changes, you know, an airplane that has 147 seats versus 187 seats, you know, it looks the same possibly to the layperson, but there may be additional 40, 50, 60 seats on those airplanes. You do that all day long. You know, several weeks or months out of the year, it starts to add up. So in August of 21 versus August of 2019, Spirit's seat capacity was well above where they were in 2019, additional 40.5% higher. The other carriers were running below their seat capacities that they had in 2019, again with the exception of American and United. The total scheduled daily departures, again, the story here is where lines merge. And you can see on the domestic activity from 2019 to 2021, the scheduled daily departures actually not only merge together, but 2021 goes higher than 2019. The last 3 months, the domestic traffic at the airport has been above pre-pandemic levels in 2019. Unfortunately, the international traffic is still, as I said, riding between 40 and 45% below. When we average it out, we still end up being about 5, 6, 7% down in total traffic, but we're anticipating hopefully by the end of the year again, so long as the variants don't slow us down further, we hope that we would be back to full strength here as we close out this calendar year.
Well, New Zealand closed down again.
I'm sorry?
New Zealand closed down again.
New Zealand did?
Yeah.
I was going to
So
go there
they'll
next
work on
week
that.
too. There's a lot of concern that even Hawaii. I was watching that came out the other day that looked like the governor in Hawaii was starting to reinstitute some of the restrictions that were in place there, including numbers on indoor gatherings to 10 or 20 people, which will curb conferences and other types of gatherings in that location for sure. As we've made our way through the pandemic, we always like to keep pace on what's happening with our average one-way domestic fares or round-trip domestic fares as well, as shown here. We continuously wind up in the least expensive category, meaning our round-trip fares are lower than many other airports in the United States. Again, we attribute that largely to maintaining a low-cost airport structure and being served primarily by low-cost airlines. So we're in there with Midway, Orlando, Las Vegas, and Denver. On the opposite side, some of the more expensive airports, Houston, Newark, San Fran, Honolulu, Washington. We put Miami in there only for comparison because everybody likes to compare us, within 20 miles of each other. They were about the middle of the pack in that ranking on the average base fare. But you can see even in the green, the second quarter, which is the most recent data in FY21, the second quarter for FLL, you can see we were below the average fares in both FY20 and FY19. If you've tried to book a flight of late, you can see you can fly a lot of different places in the country for as little as $29, $39 on many different airlines, depending upon the city that you're headed to. The FY19 actuals and the FY20 actuals, the reason we have this in here again is to compare where we were before we went into the pandemic, as we went into the pandemic, and then starting to come out of the pandemic. The cost per enplanement for FLL, you could see, was at $687. We wound up at $1078 in FY20. That's not where we were in terms of where we were forecasted to be. We wound up there as a result of the pandemic. What you see here with the other airports, to give you a sense or flavor for who's lower cost, who's higher cost, as we roll into the next series of slides, you'll see what our cost structure is and where our CPE is going to be for FY22. It kind of jumps all over the place in FY20 and FY21 due to the pandemic. And because it jumps around a lot, we thought it might be helpful to highlight some of the columns. So you'll see that the 2019 actual and the 22 budget are highlighted in the same color. They're the columns that we are comparing those figures and those numbers. So when it comes to revenue and expenses primarily, they're the ones that we want you to focus in on as traffic starts to get back to 2019 or pre-pandemic levels. Not to say that the FY20 or the 21 budget or forecast aren't important, but because traffic was all over the place, we weren't sure where we were going. And in some cases, we really wanted to focus in on the two outer markers, if you will. So the last column gives the variance. Again, we're performing better on the operating revenue side. The next slide we'll go into will actually detail a little bit what that looks like. But operating expenses have gone up as well. It costs more to run shuttle buses, to do janitorial services, to do different things at the airport. So we have to recognize that our expenses are increasing at the same time. Some of the other highlights you'll see on passenger facility charges, you all will recognize that the airport receives, on average, about $4.30 for every departing passenger we have going out. So in FY19, that number was up around 75 million, and then it dropped off significantly in 20 and 21. We're forecasting that to be back up around 71 million in FY22 as the passengers come back. Grants are listed in there as well. Capital grants, whether they be from the feds or the state. So you'll see those numbers remain consistent. We use to support our projects as we go forward. If you look down the bottom, there's some footnotes that we've put down there to help people understand how we flow our budget from year to year. You know that we are a residual-based airport. The airlines back our debt, and the agreement that exists with the airlines requires that we take a look at all of our revenues and expenses each and every year, and particularly the non-airline revenue that we get from concessions, from parking and rental cars, and compare that to the expenditures. And generally, expenditures are always going to outweigh the non-airline revenue. So what's left over becomes what the airlines have to pay. And that's why it's important that we try to keep our non-airline revenue as high as we can. But when concessions are closed and parking garages are empty, and rental cars were non-existent for a little while, it starts to wreak havoc with the budget process. So the 57 million that you see down at the bottom in deferred revenue, we actually took that money from our reserves to kind of help balance the sheet out, as well as 37.4 million in airline settlement. And you said, Mark, what does settlement mean? Again, the residual nature of our deal is that when we come up short with cash at the end of the day, even though the airlines may have paid everything that they were required to pay us according to the forecast, just as we set here today, and in a couple of weeks you'll set the rates and charges, hopefully through the public hearing process. Even though they pay us what we anticipate paying, if we come up short, they're required under our agreement to actually pay a true-up at the end. So that 37.4 million was more of a, we'll call it a settlement or a true-up at the end of the year. The different tranches of the CARES funding are included in there, the 95.7 and the 39.3. That was part of the CARES Act funding that the airport received, 135 million. Sometimes I just refer to them as CARES Act 1, 2, and 3, but the CARES Act was the first set of federal funding. The CRISA is the 27.3 million. That is also in there. That is the one that we are currently going through that process. There is still ARPA yet to come, or the rescue plan money that the airport is slated to receive. We're not in possession of that. That'll come later, probably in the next fiscal year. On the revenue side, again, I wanted to show you there's increases in the, specifically in the airline revenues, collecting more money from the airlines. We need to start to make sure that we collect enough and replenish some of those reserves. But also on the rental car side, you recall that I was before you a couple, 2-3 years ago, we renegotiated the rental car deal where the definition of gross revenue changed, and they also started paying us fixed rent, which they had never paid in the past. That's contributing to that revenue number going as high as it is at 83 million. Parking will probably be relatively flat for this coming fiscal year, as well as concession revenues. We don't anticipate we're going to see huge spikes in parking or concession revenues for the coming year. And our other revenue goes up, and that's sitting at 28 million right now. The majority of other revenue is non-airline tenant rent that gets paid to the airport. Footnote at the bottom, includes the 57.8 million deferred revenue, the 37.4 million settlement. Without these, the airline revenue requirement would have been lower, would have been at 115.1 million. To give you a sense for where the revenue comes from, again for the airport, airline revenue is shown in green. Let me just do a quick comparison between the two fiscal years. We're pretty close. Airline revenue was at 40% in 19, 42% in 22. Rental cars, again, pretty close. Parking, a couple percentage points lower in FY22. Concession revenue, a little bit lower, and other slightly higher. But generally speaking, the diversity of the revenue stays relatively close. And it stays pretty high with respect to the overall airline, non-airline revenue split. Again, non-airline revenue accounting for 58% of our total revenue. The OpEx side of the house, you can see the increases, salary and wages have gone up. And there's further explanations on the next pages. Custodial, shuttle services have gone up. Other contractual services remains relatively flat. Law enforcement, our agreements with BSO to provide law enforcement as well as fire rescue in 2019 was $34 million. 21 forecast took it to 33, and in the FY22 budget it's at 42 million. Utilities and some of the others that you see on there are staying relatively flat. Maintenance, you'll see, will go up from 14 million up to 17 million, and again, we have some explanations on the following page. So salary and wages is 9.3 million increase due to increased salary, healthcare, and pension costs. Back when we went into the pandemic, we had a number of vacancies that were eliminated from our budget cycle. There were 73 positions. We are seeking to get some of those positions reinstated because we need the bodies to be able to maintain the airport moving forward as busy as we are. Contractual services includes increases to custodial services as well as the shuttle bus fleet and the contract with the shuttle bus company. We had a new contract issued for the shuttle bus company a couple of years ago. We were using buses that were owned by the airport and were over a decade old and probably had 1.5 million miles on them. And our new contract with the shuttle bus company required them to lease new buses so that our passengers and employees could be transported around in more reliable transportation. The law enforcement side of the house and fire rescue, you can see the increase there for LEO as law enforcement officer, 3.4 million increase driven by payroll and operating costs, but also reinstating what we had taken out in FY21, 1.8 million to fill 10 long-standing vacancies that we asked them not to pursue while we were in the midst of the pandemic. Fire rescue, 4.6 million increase driven largely by, again, increase in ARF services. Pre-alert fire watch is something that we're required to do that as we have different levels of construction and whatnot that are going on around the airport, it doesn't take much for an alarm to go off. And the way that the fire marshal's office and the code interprets that, when those alarms go off, all of our passengers have to leave the building and go out onto the AOA or the air operations area, out onto what you refer to as the tarmac. By using fire watch, trained personnel that are on duty, they can stop an alarm from being immediately issued until such time as they can verify if it's truly a fire or if it's something different, so that we're not dumping people out of the building, which can be even more dangerous if it's a thunderstorm and lightning or other types of things that are going on. We want to try to keep our passengers in the building as best we can. We also are putting back in the second medical unit. We took that out at the beginning of the pandemic because we didn't have any passengers. Now we not only have the passengers back, but the medical calls have significantly increased. We're looking to get that medic unit back to provide services to our patrons. Maintenance costs are increasing by CCTV or as well as baggage handling system equipment, but we're going down in some other areas. When we went into the pandemic, we all kind of tried to tighten the belt. We tried to cut where we could cut, and some of those reductions, we think it was a healthy exercise, and we think some of those things are going to stay in place, and we're going to suppress some of those expenditures. Other areas, unfortunately, are going up, so it's a little bit of a balancing act, and we'll continue to see if there's ways that we can reduce expenditures, going forward. Some of the systems are getting more and more complex each day. Baggage handling systems are computer driven, and they're very, very sophisticated systems, as well as the CCTV and access control systems for the airport. General and administrative, you see at the end, 2.9 million or 2.6 million increase, rather, primarily driven by a 3.9 million increase in promotional and marketing incentives to attract new international service. What that is, when you go into air service development, most every airport across the United States does this, and it's been approved by the commission in the past, is that if we're able to attract a new airline to entice them to come to our airport, particularly if it's a service destination that we really want to have in our portfolio, maybe it's Europe, maybe it's Asia, maybe it's another location, we generally have to offer them some ways of offsetting their costs, whether it's through marketing or deferral of fees. So that 3.9 million is in there. It's a set number of flights with a certain number of offset for each one of those flights. That may or may not occur, but if we did have the opportunity to actually attract new international service to the markets that we're seeking, some of that which we lost, if you recall, Emirates stopped flying during the pandemic. They've recently inaugurated flying now into Miami, and Norwegian long-haul service went out of business. So those flights that we had going from Fort Lauderdale to Europe and Scandinavia are no more. So myself and my air service development manager are working hard to see who we can attract to try to get some of that long-haul service back across the pond. We're very healthy as we go south into South America. We're very healthy as we go into Canada, but we're not as healthy getting across the Atlantic, going the opposite direction. Key rates and charges, I know everybody looks at this, the emplanements, actual emplanements in FY19, again, 18,164, rounded to 18.2. The budget for FY22 is at 17.4. The landing fees, $1.57, cheaper than the $1.62 from before. Our average rental rate has gone down a bit from 144 to 136. The FIS fee is up from 19, but down from where it was in 20 and 21. And then our CPE averages out at 799. And it averages out, again, because the signatory airline has a much lower rate at 729. If you're non-signatory, you don't get the benefits of those reduced rates. Your cost per plane passenger would be up at $38.32. Non-signatory airlines were not required to write us that big check at the end when the budget falls short.
Excuse me, Mr. Gill, I was wondering if you could start over for Mr. Ryan, who just decided to join us.
Absolutely.
It's Commissioner Ryan. Okay.
Okay, roll the
Mr.
clock
Gale,
back. So.
Please continue, sir.
So just a few slides on the master plan update, and then we'll quickly touch on the capital. Again, we retained the services of our master plan consultant, Ricondo Associates, and we've gone through a number of different exercises, and I'm still actually working on this with them, stripping every layer of the master plan down to its most basic componentry, along with the cost and what a funding source might be, so that I can effectively begin negotiations with our airlines. If you recall, our airlines, when it comes to capital programming at the airport, by virtue of their agreement, if we want to do something that's going to affect their rates and charges, they get to vote on the project. They can vote up or they can vote down, and it's a majority interest. Now, pre-pandemic, most of them wanted to continue to grow and support the program. I think based upon the numbers that you can see here, yeah, we're in the orange with the forecast. We start to match back up with that line by the year 2023, 2024, and we pretty much ride the same line with minor exception out through 2035. The same will hold pretty much true when it comes to operations or takeoff and landings. We'll accelerate back up to that forecast line in the 2023, 2024 timeframe. You see a little bit more of a divergence or a wedge building out in the outer years there. Not horribly different, a few 100,000, not enough for us to change course. But you may ask what's driving that difference in that area. What we found in talking to some of our airline partners going forward is we think that there's going to be a significant upgauging of airplanes in the future, meaning getting rid of some of the smaller airplanes, continuing to bring airplanes on that have more and more seats on board, operating fewer flights. So we may see fewer operations with just as many or more passengers on board. Again, it's not horribly different on the trajectory, especially when you talk about 12, 15 years out, we wanted to make you aware of that. The estimated annual passengers in millions in 2019, it was actually at 36. We anticipate hitting 36 million again in the 22-23 timeframe. We're still in recovery mode. 38 million passengers under the original baseline we were scheduled to be at right now in 2021. We don't think that we'll hit that probably for another 2 years into 2023. But then after that, all of our forecasts kind of ride along what was done on the original master plan baseline. 42 million, 47 million, 52 million, all at the same years, the 2025, 2030, and the 2035. And I say that just so as you look at the capital program, when I start the negotiation process with our airlines who have several years left on their agreement, and they want to move forward with capital investment at the airport, they're going to want to know what do they get in return for backing hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of debt going forth in the airport. More likely than not, they'll want to talk about what term is left on the agreement and how can we negotiate that forward. Based upon these forecasts, we think that they will be sufficiently interested, at least the majority of them, in order to move forward with that negotiation process. As we get into the capital program, you'll see at certain points references to master plan, which is the first seeds of actually working on some of the upfront, the advanced planning or the program definition work for the master plan with specific emphasis that I have told them on the landside portions of the airport. We can't continue to add gates at the airport without addressing some of the landside issues. How do you get in and out of the airport? How do you move around the landside portion of the facility? We just have this broken down into just general categories. The airfield with the ARF station, Aircraft Rescue and Firefighter Station, a taxi lane. If anybody has any questions regarding any of these projects, be happy to answer them in greater detail. These go on, these are the FY22 capital and budget items with their appropriate funding sources, cash, bond work, FAA grants, FDOT grants, or PFC. And you can see we cover airfield, terminals, parking, landside. You can see down at the bottom the intermodal center, $10 million to be moving some of the intermodal center planning through its advanced planning and program definition document and getting some of the upfront work out of the way while we continue our discussions with FDOT on the intermodal center. Supplemental curb, again, when we get into the supplemental curb, is the long-range plan for the airport that after the Palm Garage is demolished, it'll give us the ability to rework the roadway system in such a way that it can handle the volume of vehicles that are coming at us each and every day, whether they be private auto, for hire, TNC, an Uber, a Lyft, charter buses and whatnot. Right now, as you've seen in the master plan presentations before, the level of service on our roadways hits E, F levels at different times of the day. We have to get some of the landside portion of the airport fixed before we focus in on adding more and more gates on the air side. Then this is just the 5-year summary, what it looks like at the end. It varies from 183 million in 23 up to 848 million in 2026 for a total 5-year of 1.654 billion. Again, some of that in those outer years, the 23 through 26, that's going to be a function of negotiating with our airlines in order to move forward on some of these. The next couple of slides are just all of that in greater detail, similar to what you saw before, only it breaks out onto the 5-year. Again, if you have any questions regarding any of these in specifics, happy to address them. If not, Mayor, I believe that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions the Commission may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gill. One question first. What impact, if any, has COVID had on the overall capital improvement program that you're working on, I assume it has to have slowed it down substantially. On the other hand, during times that some of the terminals are closed, that might have been a better opportunity to do some things.
Yeah.
So it has overall it resulted in a slowdown, or?
No, I would say it's been rather neutral. So many airports, and we tried to do this as well, that while we had those periods of less activity, was to work with our contractors to see whether or not we could get into more areas at the same time without disturbing the traveling public, to accelerate the projects through. Unfortunately, contractors and their workforce were affected by COVID as well, and they saw significant hits. We're seeing it in our workforce every day. I talk to my airport colleagues across the country, our concessionaires. Anybody that's in the service and hospitality industry right now is seeing the inability to actually attract staff. And where they are able to attract staff sometimes, they lose it on the other side due to folks being out with COVID or in some type of isolation or quarantine. So I would say, Mayor, that it was neutral for the existing terminal modernization program. Because we pressed pause and on the master plan and said, let's do a revalidation of the forecast, the thought process was, have we just slid the time frame by 18 or 24 months and everything else remains the same as we identified before? Or was there some secular shift in the way that we're going to be moving around the country or the world later that we need to take into account when we plan the future of the airport? It looks like we've just shifted everything, but to that point that I noted earlier about upgauging of airplanes, so fewer operations, but probably just as many passengers. There are some of the subtleties that we've noticed. And now we're stripping everything down into its granular basis on which projects need to go first, what are they going to cost, how are we going to phase it in and not totally disrupt the airport. That's something that hopefully working with the county administrator, I'll be coming back here in the relatively near future to give you a deeper dive on that.
Thank you, sir. Questions? I see Vice Mayor.
I have a question.
Senator Rich, Commissioner Furr, and that's all I see.
Just,
Vice Mayor Udine, you're recognized, sir.
just one quick question. I know that the way that our model works is that the airports opine and vote on capital improvements and operations of the airport as they move forward. Without being disrespectful to any specific company, does that work the other way? How does the airport work with carriers on their growth plans, like what we've seen recently with Spirit and what's been going on with Spirit Airlines? Maybe we can't do anything, but I'm just curious how we do that to the flying public, because I know that there was a lot of travel interruption and
Sure.
Whatever the last few weeks.
It's a great question, Vice Mayor, and of course, nobody wanted to see the, quote, meltdown that occurred with Spirit. I've told maybe a few of you already, it's not the first time that I've ever seen an airline meltdown in my almost 36 years of being in the business now. They're ugly when they generally occur, and I think different airlines have the ability to recover possibly faster than others. To your point, I think that, you know, there's several years left. About 5 years left on our airport use and lease agreement that gives those airlines the ability to vote on capital projects moving forward. It's not to say you can't get a capital project done if they were to vote no. You just need to find another way to actually construct those improvements without having it hit the rate base, you know, for the airlines. As we talk to the airlines and try to come to agreement as to, okay, this project, Terminal 5 adds 5 gates. Who's going to go in there? Is Spirit going to go in there? Is JetBlue going to go in there? I'm going to move other airlines around. And what does that get me in terms of capacity? And how does it match your forecast for your growth, your vision for your airline? We talk to each one of our airlines, but we do it in a proprietary type confidential manner. We don't share until we kind of roll it all up in the ball. They protect, you know, their information. But it is a question that I think we do need to tackle, which is if we have an issue with how an airline has either conducted their business or has failed, at least in our eyes, to adequately serve their passengers, what rights do we have? And I think we start to cross over certain federal lines, and I would probably have several conversations with the county attorney and his team before we took action, if we were so inclined to go in that direction in terms of denying them access to facilities and whatnot. We could easily find ourselves in running afoul of federal law on grant assurances and other types of things that we're required to do as a public use airport.
I mean, I'm not suggesting that it's anything that extreme, but when you look at different parts of the airport as you're traveling throughout the summer, and last summer even more so than this summer when it was more in the height of COVID, I mean, when you went to the airport, you saw a difference in the different terminals depending on which carriers were operating getting your bags through and lining up to get where you needed to go. Just something that I observed.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. We'll look at that. Those operational day-to-day activities, I'm sure we can work with the airlines to improve those so that you don't notice a difference from terminal to terminal or from location to location.
Very good. Okay, Senator Rich, you're recognized, ma'am.
Thank you,
Followed by Commissioner
Mayor.
Furr.
Okay, so, Mark, thank you for your excellent update and presentation, as usual. I just had two quick questions. I had mentioned to you, I think, or we had talked about the fact that the employees, were using the regular garages, and you said that they were going to be moved back to off-site, because we had gotten quite a number of calls about people talking about not finding places in the garages. So I just wanted to know if that had been effectuated, or if that's still something that's coming up, or where you are with that.
It has not transpired just yet, Senator, and good afternoon. We were anticipating to move the employees back to the remote lot. When we went in to the pandemic and we told them to park in the garages for not only cost savings, but there were health and safety issues as well. Instead of crowding on the buses and whatnot, we thought it was better that they come on airport. We wanted to move them back out because there were many, many times in the past 2 to 3 months, particularly on the weekends, where we would run out of parking for our patrons. And there's about 3,500 spaces right now that are being utilized by our employees. So we thought we need to move them back so that our patrons can park at the airport or looking to take flights. But we've run into a problem that everybody else has run into, and again, as airport operators, we talk across the nation, and virtually every airport that has one of these is saying the same thing. They can't get bus drivers to actually get in to fill the shuttle buses. So moving the employees out to the remote lot, I wouldn't be able to transport the employees back and forth. Now, we can go so far as to say, well, that's your problem, contractor. We're already offering several $1,000 signing bonuses to entice drivers to come on, but I think you've seen it in the school districts. I think you've seen it in other locations. So we have held off on putting the employees or relocating the employees out to that remote lot for the primary reason we don't have enough bus drivers right now in order to affect that. And I think it would be disastrous to the airport if we moved in that direction prematurely.
Okay.
I think it will come, though.
Information. It's something, we can share with people who, call about not finding parking and so forth, that, there is an actual reason why it's not happening right now. Yeah.
We converted
the other thing was, sorry.
No, I was saying in order to try to accommodate our passengers, we repurposed the employee lot as an overflow lot. And so we could run a couple of shuttle buses, and we have directional signage that took them out to the the former employee lot, and they paid a rate of $10 a day there, and the lot was only open, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And then demand drops off precipitously on a Sunday afternoon. We really started hitting the problems on Friday. The last weekend or so, that demand has not been there, but we do think it'll return again in the fall. So we are watching this very, very closely, Senator, and I do anticipate we will need to move those employees back as soon as we have a sufficient shuttle bus fleet to take care of it.
Okay. Senator Rich, give me one moment, please. Vice Mayor, you have the gavel. The next person is, the only other person in queue is Commissioner Rich. It's Commissioner Furr.
Sounds like Commissioner Rich.
Pardon me, no, I still had one more question. Excuse me.
No, I was just handing the gavel to Vice Mayor Udine and advising him that after you, the only other person on the list is Commissioner Furr.
Okay. So this goes back to what I've asked for the other two presentations about the American Rescue Plan Act funding. So the only one that you have listed on the income statement that's still out there, I think, is the $110 million from ARPA?
Yes, Senator, we have not come into possession of that $110 million. The airport's allocation for ARPA is split into two pots, $110 million directly to the airport, and then $15 million that comes to the airport for use for concession relief, concession mitigation, both of which carry a lengthy list of guidelines and restrictions and prohibitions about how we can or cannot use, those funds when we get them.
Yeah. Okay, so where is the money being held up now since the American Rescue Plan Act money has been out there for months?
We're going through the process. That money is funneled to us, Senator, through the FAA. We literally just got through the CRISA application process and took possession of the $27 million within the last month or so. We're just now starting the application process with the FAA for the $110 million grant, and it'll probably take us again a couple of months to get through that.
Okay, so the bottom line is, though, that it does not have anything to do with Tallahassee at all?
No, we work directly with the FAA on those grants.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
I think everybody's filling the coop.
Thank you, Senator Rich. I'll now recognize Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Very good presentation. That
Thank you,
gives us
Commissioner.
a very good idea where we're at and where we're trying to go to. The one question I have is, are we putting ourselves in position with the master plan to be able to, look towards some of the infrastructure money coming on the federal side? And given the fact that I think on the 30th, FDOT is kind of going to be talking about where all the stations, the commuter rail stations, all that kind of goes together. And it seems like it would be ideal for what they're looking for on that infrastructure money. Are we putting ourselves in position for that?
So this is where I would normally turn to you, Commissioner, and say, get out of my head. So my eye is keenly on the infrastructure package that hopefully will make its way through Congress and then ultimately get signed off by the President. In that infrastructure package, there's $25 billion that is earmarked for airports. I wish it was more, but it's sitting at $25 billion right now. And it's broken down. There are certain allocation formulas and certain, over the course of about 5 years, that money will be dispensed. But there's $5 billion that's identified for what they're putting quotations around new terminal projects. So that's where my eye is right now with my team, is how do we get ourselves, including possibly some of our congressional delegation, to aim for that as well. And on the discussions with FDOT, the county administrator knows we're engaged fully with FDOT, with Secretary Jerry O'Reilly and his team on a number of different aspects as it relates to the intermodal center, the airport people mover, roadway entrance and exit modifications and improvements and whatnot. And also, at the same time, in steady discussions with our friends from Brightline. Matter of fact, I am coming here directly from the Hard Rock, where Patrick Goddard, their CEO, and I were on the same panel talking about these things. So we are
So it's a team effort.
We are moving down the proverbial track. I like runway better, but it didn't go very well there. So
Good to hear. Glad to hear. Okay. That's the main thing I want to make sure. Thanks.
Okay, any other? Commissioner Bogan.
Mark, I just want, in all seriousness, you do such a great job.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you for always being available.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Appreciate the support of all of you. Very much do.
Any of our phone participants have any comments? I know we got Senator Rich, I thought.
We got to ask somebody to mute. Whoever's on the phone, can you mute yourself?
That must be me. Let me just
Perfect.
work that he's done, and my question is this: how are we assisting the airlines with looking at opening new markets as they become available?
If the question, Commissioner, to open new markets or reopen existing markets?
Reopen existing markets.
So
I know, for example, that Spirit wanted to do Nicaragua. Is there any way for us to assist them with that?
I don't believe so, but Managua, there are several places in Brazil, Recife. Belize is still not available just yet. Canada is now starting to open back up, so we're working with folks right now when they come to us and they say, we want to start flying additional flights in, can you accommodate us? So we are in discussions with our airlines each and every day about what's open, what's closed, whether or not they feel like the restrictions are too prohibitive for them to fly back and forth. We have most, I would say we probably have about 60 to 65% of our international destinations back. We just, like I said, we don't have all of the frequencies back. The 1/3 of the destinations, that's comprised of some of the destinations that we lost, and I'm doing the comparison to FY19, when we lost service to Dubai from Emirates, we lost the Norwegian service to several European and Scandinavian countries, but we also have, as I said, identified several South American, Central American points that we have not gotten back just yet. So we might fly to Cancun, but we don't get to Mexico City just yet. But we are in steady conversations with all of our carriers, Commissioner.
Any other questions, Commissioner Holness? Hearing none, I'll open to any other members of the commission. County Admin. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Thank you, Mr. Gale, for your presentation and your professionalism as always. If there's nothing else before the board, I say that this meeting is adjourned, and we'll see everybody Tuesday at 10 o'clock.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
They're in Miami now. They decided to